So, same time next week?
Well, of course.
Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
What the frack?
What the frack?
What the frack?
What the frack?
President Obama, are you fracking kidding me?
Reopen the EPA studies.
In Texas, Wyoming, and Pennsylvania.
Fracking pollutes our oceans.
Fracking poisons our water.
Fracking makes climate change worse.
Fracking relies on toxic chemicals that cause cancer.
Ban fracking now.
Ban fracking now.
Go on. Ban it.
Ban fracking now.
Please.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds. At highway speeds, that's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop the texts, stop the wrecks.
Just this month, my bill was like $138.
Even at one phone call a week cost me $40 to $50 every month.
I am living on a fixed income of SSI, so this is really a great hardship. Families are being punished. When they incarcerate your children, they incarcerate the whole family.
In 2011, the Media Action Grassroots Network, Working Narratives, and Prison Legal News founded the Campaign for Prison Phone Justice, an effort to call on the FCC to address the cost of interstate phone calls. The campaign mobilized prisoners to send hundreds of letters. Advocates and families filled out postcards, met with elected officials, and signed petitions. Partnerships were formed across the political spectrum and with groups in the criminal justice, civil rights, and public interest community. The film distribution company Participant Media and director Ava DuVernay joined the fight through a social action campaign tied to the release of the feature film Middle of Nowhere. In an effort to push the FCC to act, the campaign hosted a historic rally outside of the Federal Communications Commission where for the first time, families of prisoners, elected officials, civil rights and faith leaders came together to call for an end to predatory phone rates.
We're all held captive when predatory phone companies gouge our families.
My son has been incarcerated now for over 10 years, and my husband estimates that in the time we spent over $25,000 on prison phone calls.
My hero's not yours, you probably arrested them. Your schools probably neglected them. They spawn thoughts, you probably infected them. Feed us what you feed us, you can lay us next to them. FBI call it major crimes. Babies making babies cry.
We came here to Foster City, where we're going to watch UC Berkeley, University of California SWAT do a hostage rescue scenario.
All personnel aware of the proper protection equipment. This includes all personnel identified as staff, students, role players, EIDs, and support staff. Feet, eyes, throat, and chronic protection is mandatory and should be worn at all times by personnel directly involved in or near the scenario. Always check your mask prior to use to ensure there are no cracks in the mask and safe working conditions.
Should I put the water in there now?
Yeah, go ahead. This is like some kind of chemical agent?
Yeah. Copy, we're ready. I'm gonna get shot. I already know it, dude. Feeney's yelling at me.
Help me. Show your hands. Help me. Show your hands. Back away.
Gentlemen, we have a chemical.
We need to pull our person out. Get these guys out of here. Pull them out. Pull them out. Pull them out.
Put your hands on your face. Put your hands on your face.
Keep him covered.
Your head up. He's got a shotgun back there.
That's all right. Keep his hands up where we can.
Hands on your face.
Hands on your face. On your face.
Someone cover me. I got a holster up, bro.
Okay, pull him around the corner. Pick him up. Get him out of the building. Quickly. We've got this. Just get that guy out of there. You, come towards us. Keep your hands on your face. Turn around. Face away from us. Back towards us. Quickly. Back up towards me. Quickly, quickly, quickly. Pull him out of the room.
We're exfilling, Billy.
Yes, we are exfilling.
It was actually around 92, 94. There was an attack on the chancellor at his residence, which is on campus. And we realized at the time that we didn't have any resources to deal with that kind of threat when it took place. So, and I think about 15 years before, they had some kind of semblance of a SWAT team. So they regenerated the idea of
I see.
activating a SWAT team.
And then since then, you guys have kind of branched out to doing what kind of stuff?
Well, since then, we train for everything. We train for every eventuality, barricaded subjects. Like I said, most of what we do is high-risk warrants.
Okay. And it's something like it could be like a mugging kind of thing, just like on the street.
Depends.
Or
I mean,
like
a mugging, but if it's armed, particularly.
Right, an armed mugging.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then obviously we're looking for training for anything else. That we might be faced with. And that's what's great about Urban Shield is we couldn't duplicate this on our own.
Broadcasting around the nation, on your radio, on your TV, and online. This is the Bill Press Show.
Well, white-on-white crime strikes again. In Texas, of course, we're on top of it here this morning on the Bill Press Show, this Tuesday, May 19th, 2015, where we will ask what is going on in white culture that white people are killing other white people. Is it the drugs they take? Is it the high divorce rate? Is it the music they listen to? The sports they play? What is going on with these white people in Texas?
Where are the positive male figures in their life?
Where are the positive male figures in their life? And how much of the blame for this biker gang violence that we saw this past Sunday, which killed 9 people and injured 18, how much of the blame do we lay at the feet of Sons of Anarchy?
That's right.
Which I'm sure led to this entire incident. Good morning again. Igor Volsky here of Think Progress on the Bill Press Show, joined, of course, by the entire Bill Press team. Peter Ochburn.
Hi, Igor.
Good morning. Good morning, Peter.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Elisa Murphy running the board.
Hey, good morning. Good to have you here.
Good morning. Thank you. Jamie Benson taking your calls at 866-55-PRESS. He's waving at you, 866-557-7377. And Cyprian Bolding running our video board, making us look good on TawkrTV, which is where you're watching us on YouTube, on your local progressive radio station, or, of course, on the iHeartRadio app, on the Progressive Voices channel. Am I getting that right? Here we go.
There's the Progressive
Voices channel on the TuneIn app.
There you go.
And then there's the iHeartRadio. I've only done this half a dozen times.
We're
That's
everywhere.
Okay. Yeah, everywhere you want to be.
So many ways to get in touch with us.
So many ways to listen in as we really dissect and try to dive into the culture of these white groups and white organizations. Because, Peter, 83% of white victims in 2011 were murdered by other whites.
We need to do something about
this white and white crime.
Let's talk about this.
Talk about, what exactly is happening, why this is happening. Is there something in the psyche of these white people that we can fix as a society? Maybe, do they not have enough jobs? Is it easier to be on government programs for them than to get jobs? And what role do those play
it's a good point.
in this violence?
It's a very good point.
Listen, lots to talk about this morning. 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. We're making light, of course, of the great disparity in the media coverage between the killings or violence or how police treats African Americans when they're arrested, and how they treat biker gangs of hundreds of people. There's a particular photo, Peter, that kind of made the rounds on Sunday when the violence first broke out in Waco, Texas, at the Twin Peaks restaurant of, maybe dozens of bikers in their little vests and the biker gang patches and logos and everything on their jacket, just sitting behind a police barricade, tweeting, Facebooking,
playing on
their phones. The scene, I think, would have been quite different if the race of the perpetrators was different. I would imagine people on the pavement, people with hands behind their backs, handcuffs on their hands, but these guys were just kind of kept back. Ultimately, 170 charged in this incident.
Yeah. 192 people were arrested, 170 were charged, like you said. But to think about the fact that you had 200 people, nearly, that were arrested, and you look at what happens when a young African-American at, say, the University of Virginia tried to get into a club, allegedly trying to use a fake ID, and the cops beat the crap out of him, threw him on the ground, blood in his face, put him in handcuffs, dragged him away. Compared to these guys who were just leaning on police cruisers, playing around on their phones, waiting to find out what was going to happen to them. It's pretty striking.
Angry Birds, Snapchat. I mean, they really had access
I think they were
to it all.
On Pinterest. The Pinterest pages?
That's where they are.
Yeah, well, they're picking up the new badges for embroidery.
How do you think they get all those ideas?
That's
they're crafty.
Right. That's right, yeah.
I mean, they have to know how to sew.
It's not easy.
No.
It's not easy to be a gang member. These groups, I think, have been around since the Vietnam War, really, is when they formed, or that's kind of the lore, is that some of these veterans came back from Vietnam. They found that the government didn't have their back, and so they formed this camaraderie with other veterans, and this turned into biker gangs who now sustain themselves. They claim to have, you won't believe this, when I saw this number, I said, there's no way this is true. They claim to have 2,500 members in 16 countries, and these are the two kind of main gangs, or two of the main gangs, the Banditos and the Cossacks. 2,500 members in 16 countries.
You don't know about the Cossacks?
Well, I do.
The biker gang?
Well, I do, of course. Julian Schur is the author of Angels of Death, and he was explaining kind of what these groups do and what they're all about.
Unless people are willing to see these guys for what they are, which is the mafia on wheels, this kind of thing will continue.
And he says what it's all about is drugs and claiming territory and having kind of your own little fiefdom in that corner of the country, mainly in Texas.
It's always about power, and behind that, drugs and the rest of the criminal business.
Meth and everything else, and of course marijuana, they produce, they distribute it, they transport it. And this, of course, isn't the first time you saw this kind of shootout. We see it occasionally with these groups where they're arguing about territory or the business in general. And in this case, authorities say, although it's not clear what exactly caused this incident, they say that the Twin Peaks restaurant, was warned of a possible confrontation, that the groups were calling reinforcements from other parts of the country, and yet even though they had a heightened police presence, you still had ultimately 9 dead and 18 injured, and as you say, 196 arrested and 170 bikers booked. And now, of course, the FBI is saying the big threat is, are there going to be repercussions to this? Are we going to see kind of efforts by other group members to seek vengeance, and will we see more violence come out of it?
I feel like we've flashbacked to like the 1980s, right?
Yeah.
Where biker gangs and the threat of biker gangs are a real thing. It's been a minute since this was a reality in this country. It's interesting to point out, by the way, like where this happened at this restaurant is what this place is called, this Twin Peaks restaurant. It's one of these things where the women wear next to nothing and serve you food. It's like a Hooters knockoff.
Yeah.
They've shut that place down. They revoked the
alcohol license.
How do you say? Yeah, the alcohol license and the franchise. It's
closed down there. You can't go there.
No more,
yeah.
All done. But I mean, 192 or 170 that were arrested. I don't know how many other bikers there are in Waco, Texas. Like, how many more bikers are there?
And how big is this restaurant? You have that many people there.
It's a bit. No, these things. I've never been in one, but I've seen one. They're large restaurants. I mean, it's like the size of like a Chili's or an Applebee's situation. One of those. It's like an actual restaurant. It's not just like a scummy, scuzzy biker bar.
And this is apparently an annual meeting they have. Every year they come in and they discuss the business there.
Which is really cute.
Isn't it? They just all gather there on their bikes.
Yeah.
Order a round of mozzarella sticks.
Yeah, right.
And
hey, guys, who's taking notes this meeting?
They brought their Robert Rules of Order.
Yeah, right.
yeah, and just talk about, the government and how it's cracking down on these autonomous bike gangs and biker rights.
Yeah.
And live free or die. Why they're not in New Hampshire, I don't know.
It is fascinating to watch the coverage of this and wonder what it would be like if this was a group of black bikers, African-American bikers.
Oof.
Which, first of all, there are such things as black biker gangs. They don't do this type of crap. Zipper and I were talking about this yesterday. Black biker gangs don't do this type of stuff. First and foremost. Second of all, if 192 African American bikers were arrested, it would be a crisis in this country, according to the news media.
I mean, people would be talking about...
If you were a black man riding a motorcycle today after this happened, forget about it.
I mean, I just want, the police shot back at these bikers in this confrontation they had on Sunday. It's not clear if how many they killed.
That's not clear yet, yeah.
I wonder if the numbers would be higher, again, if this was a black biker gang. In other words, would the police use greater show of force in that incident if the bikers weren't these kind of white men, sons of anarchy type, where the perception is, this is like an internal problem these groups are having, and they're outlaws and we'll arrest them. But, the coverage, I think, would have been, this is a public safety threat to the entire community. Mm-hmm. You would have had these much more kind of robust police presence and all of the gear that we've seen recently. And you would have had commentators on certain networks scream and yell about, what is the FBI and what has Obama done to contribute to this kind of ability of these gangs to just roam free in this lawlessness that we've seen in America. I mean, my God, you can hear it now. But look, details are still, of course, coming out. These 170 who were arrested have, I think, a $1 million bond. So they're probably not getting out anytime soon.
Probably not.
But they'll stay in trial, and we'll get the details as they come in. But quickly, kind of pivoting off from the biker gangs and moving on to a gang all its own, which is the gang of high-paid TV anchors.
Oh, yeah, dude.
High-paid TV anchors. Brian Williams ran into some trouble earlier this year for some fibs, he told, on air over the years.
That's
and
a nice
now,
way to put it.
yeah, well, I'm generous. George Stephanopoulos, who's, of course, the head of the ABC News coverage and has been a head anchor there for quite some time, certainly formerly a Clinton aide communications director in the Clinton White House in the first Clinton term, left unceremoniously, wrote a tell-all book about the Clintons and really kind of made himself someone not to be mentioned around the Clintons, and rose to fame first as a commentator on ABC and now, of course, as a news anchor, and was supposed to lead their 2016 election coverage until it was discovered just days ago that over the course of several years, he donated $75,000 to the Clinton Foundation, the Bill, Hillary, Chelsea Clinton Foundation, and sat on some boards for the Clinton Global Initiative, which is an offshoot of the Clinton Foundation, without disclosing it, and continues to cover the Clinton Foundation story and all of the all of the questions of who donated and why and did they exert influence. Now, George has apologized for not disclosing this to viewers as he covered the Clinton Foundation and the donor scandal, which I think he should have. But for me, I don't see an inherent conflict of interest between donating to a charity, and in his case, to AIDS causes that this charity worked on, and how that prejudiced him in covering the Clinton Foundation story or Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, Peter.
You don't
You
see,
disagree.
You don't see that? You don't see how that's a conflict?
I don't see how that's a conflict. He's donating.
I do.
Well, tell me why.
I do. I really do. I think that if you, first of all, I think that this idea that a political operative is the voice of the straightforward newscast, I don't love that idea.
I don't love that idea either.
I don't think that George Stephanopoulos should be in the position that he's in.
Yeah, it's a very unlikely career path.
And I also want to be very, very clear about this. I think that if you wear your political affiliation on your sleeve, as a lot of people on MSNBC and on the other side of the dial, Fox News, do, I have no problem with political contributions. You own your political affiliation when you're on a network like that. But when you are someone like George Stephanopoulos, who's on ABC as the newsman, the straight newsman, and you have to report on someone who you have given $75,000 to.
Well, here's you haven't given it to Hillary. You gave it to the foundation.
Yeah, I know, but
to
whose
do
foundation is it?
charitable work.
I understand that 100%, but it is Hillary Clinton's fund.
It is. By the way, 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377 if you want to be part of the conversation and weigh in whether or not you think this biases George Stephanopoulos. And here's why it doesn't, Peter. Look, George, throughout his career, after he left the Clintons, did a lot to distance himself from the Clinton family, from the Clinton political machine. He wrote a tell-all book that was not very flattering, to say the least, to the Clintons. And I think his body of work speaks to his objectivity on the matter. I mean, I don't think if you look back to when he first moved up the ranks and became a newsman, I don't think a lot of people are pointing to great examples of bias. And I don't think there's great examples of bias in how he covered the Clinton Foundation story and when he interviewed the author of Clinton Cash just a couple of weeks ago. I think it was a very straightforward interview. And so I just don't understand why giving to a charity to do charitable work, and in this case, I mean, the Clinton Foundation leads in AIDS prevention in third world countries, why that necessarily means that he's more favorable to Hillary or to Bill.
In this business of show, which is what news is, let's be clear. I mean, it is show business.
Oh, I know. That's why I'm in it.
in that business, as they say, optics are everything. And the optics are pretty bad.
I think the optics are bad.
And from a business sense, if you've got a guy who is going to be covering, who will be the Democratic nominee for president, who is that closely tied to that candidate. And I know he's done some stuff to distance to himself. Yeah, he has. Some. But like it's that relationship.
It's a perception. It is a perception.
That relationship still exists, and it is a perception.
All right, 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. We want to hear from you on this Stephanopoulos saga here on the Bill Press Show.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Silicon Valley's Santa Clara County is often portrayed as a role model for the rest of the country. The county has some of the highest salaries and most expensive real estate in America. thanks in large part to the phenomenal success of tech companies such as Google, Yahoo, Intel, Adobe, and of course Apple, the nation's wealthiest and most profitable company. But Santa Clara County also has a more unseemly distinction. I'm standing near downtown San Jose, inside what is by some accounts the largest homeless encampment in America. The jungle, as it's known, occupies a 65-acre stretch of creek where about 300 people live in makeshift structures. It's less of a homeless encampment than a full-blown shantytown.
This being the largest homeless encampment in the United States, and us having Silicon Valley with Steve Jobs and all this cash, we're not supposed to have this kind of homeless problem. You know what I mean?
I done been shot with a pellet gun like 4 times, attacked with baseball bats, my house set on fire.
This is like hell on earth. I mean, this is like something you will not see, and you have to see to believe, actually. It's like first world conditions.
Hi, have you ever heard of a place called the Jungle?
Sorry?
A place called the Jungle, have you heard of it?
We're not making enough money really for conventional homes or housing, and we make too much money for subsidized homes. So we're kind of, floating between the oil and the water. We told the landlady here if it would be possible to continue staying here. She said, no, you got to go. I already rented it out. We went and loaded things into a storage facility, and it's still there. And all the campgrounds and things that we saw were too far out of the city, like KOAs and that sort of thing. So what we decided to do was to move into the jungle. So that's what we did.
A few days ago, a woman named Lydia Hernandez was robbed inside of her tent. When she refused to hand over the money, the robbers slit her throat. When she still fought back, they bashed her head with an axe. She died a few hours later. Residents say that the police never come into the jungle, so they have to fend for themselves.
There's no law down there except our own, right? There's no law. So we could smoke dope all day in the open. The dope dealers ain't scared because, they're secure.
We go to the Fairmont Hotel and have a brunch or do a philanthropy. That's not going to cut it. We need billions of dollars to go into the inner cities and go into the jungle. Silicon Valley, the Bay Area is known for its innovation, its progressive thinking. It's one of the most progressive pockets in the United States, if not the world, and certainly one of the wealthiest. If we can't do it here, it won't happen anywhere. It's got to happen here.
What the frack?
What the frack?
What the frack?
What the frack?
President Obama, are you fracking kidding me?
Reopen the EPA studies.
In Texas, Wyoming, and Pennsylvania.
Fracking pollutes our oceans.
Fracking poisons our water.
Fracking makes climate change worse.
Fracking relies on toxic chemicals that cause cancer.
Ban fracking now.
Ban fracking now.
Go on. Ban it.
Ban fracking now.
Please.
Seen on Free Speech TV and online on TawkrTV. This is the Bill Press Show.
27 minutes after the hour, closing out the first half hour of this Tuesday, May 19th, 2015 of the Bill Press Show. And putting, I think, a cap on our conversation about George Stephanopoulos and whether or not he did the right thing in, donating to the Clinton Foundation, knowing full well that he's going to be covering those 2016 elections and Hillary Clinton was running, and whether or not he should have apologized. Certainly ABC News is standing by him. He has a $105 million contract and is the face of that organization as they move into the election cycle. But I think there's a long list, and I was trying to bring it up here before the break, of other anchors, of other news people who donated to the foundation, but because they weren't associated with the Clintons, it wasn't a big deal because, hey, it's not a big deal to give to charity. It's a good thing, and we should all do it. Back with Arthur Delaney in just a second here on The Bill Press Show.
This is The Bill Press Show.
Officer, were you the one who arrested me? You gonna shake my hand? So I got invited to host a vigil called Carry the Names. And that's what they were doing, carrying the names of the people who were victims of deadly police force. Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Akai Gurley. I got a motion from Dragonfly from Stop Shopping Choir, and I started preaching. I preached up a storm as best I could, but about a minute and a half into my sermon, the place was flooded with police, Homeland Security, National Guard, state troopers, and I was pushed over and handcuffed so fast, down in the jail, down in the basement. Before you know it, I was out the door, put in prison overnight. The next morning, I'm in court. The same thing happens. I'm just rushed out of there. Then our lawyer, Wiley Steckler, gives me this iPhone. And there, in black and white, in the Gothamist, a popular paper, is this charge by Adam Lisberg, the MTA law enforcement spokesperson for this grand place. His quote is that I, Reverend Billy, physically attacked a police officer. Unbelievable. The feeling of being robbed of my work and life and identity, just the fiction. I did not touch anybody. I did not look. I know how to do this. I'm trained in nonviolence. I did not do anything. It was right here. It was right here. It happened right here. I was simply arrested while I was speaking and taken away, and that's it. The cold feeling in my city, the city that I love, that city spokespersons whose salary I pay for with my taxes, that they would say this. I can just feel the rending apart of the community, that we are not that close. We're not. They are willing to say this, and they think that they can just say anything about anybody and get away with it. So we have something in the Church of Stop Shopping called radical forgiveness. Amen?
Cops and bankers love their children.
I forgive the police.
We gotta love them too. Cops and bankers love their mothers.
But I'll stay radical.
Mothers love their brothers. We gotta love them too.
But we'll wake up every morning forgiving each other, reaching out, touching, telling stories, having humor, being in a community together, sharing our children, sharing the streets, sharing the climate, being in the city together. But forgiving each other, being grateful to each other, helping each other out, living together, living together.
I got a daughter just turned 4. What do we do in the superstore? What do we do with the blood and the gore? The water's rising through our door. Love our children too. Love our children too.
Amen. Earthalujah.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds. At highway speeds, that's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop the texts, stop the wrecks.
Connect with The Bill Press Show on Twitter. Follow us at BP Show and tweet using the hashtag WatchingBP. This is The Bill Press Show.
33 minutes after the hour, The Bill Press Show for this Tuesday, May 19th, 2015. Bill, by the way, for those of you wondering, is in Cuba. And I have started making a short list of things I would like him to bring back as a gift for me when I see him next week.
Yeah.
What's on the list?
It includes all kinds of alcohol. It includes
rum.
of
Rum
course,
for sure.
rum, of course. It includes maybe like some kind of tchotchke thing.
I really
that
want
I
a
can,
Cuban
put
cigar.
somewhere in my house.
I really want a Cuban
I'd take
cigar.
a Cuban
I
cigar.
don't smoke cigars,
Yeah.
but I would smoke a Cuban cigar.
Yeah, I wish cigars weren't disgusting.
Right,
I would love to have one.
But have you had a Cuban? How do you know it's disgusting?
I don't know, man. Whenever I try to have a cigar, it just goes out. Like, well,
I can't imagine that a Cuban cigar is that much better than what we have here. And
it's like a gigantic cigarette.
yeah.
That you smoke for a really long time.
That's what it is. It's just a humongous cigarette.
Okay, so listen,
gives me a headache.
it's agreed to. Next week we all come back here.
Yeah.
Bill brings us cigars, and we have a little cigar smoking
Yeah,
party
rum
on the
shots and
show with
cigar
rum
smokes.
shots. And
Yeah.
So he's shopping.
Yeah,
Basically.
yeah. I mean, I hope so. I mean, I'm gonna FedEx him my list after the show.
Yeah, perfect.
So we'll see how he does.
Perfect.
Perfect.
He
Well-
does have internet access down there.
Oh, does he? Because he was worried about that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll just
Because
email.
we sent
I'll
that
email.
guy to set it up.
He has Cuban Twitter. Cuban Twitter. Trying to figure it out.
Cuban Twitter's the best Twitter.
By the way, Bill's gone, but Arthur Delaney here, politics reporter for the Huffington Post. Follow him on Twitter at Arthur Delaney HP, and of course online at HuffingtonPost.com, where you can get all of his latest and greatest. Delaney, I was looking last night in preparation for this show, like, what am I going to talk to him about? And I saw a story. Paul LePage wants to kick ex-cons off food stamps, drug test everybody. And when I saw it, I thought, okay, Paul LePage, love him or hate him, he's in his second term as governor of Maine. He's like the greatest performance artist of governors and says the craziest things and does the craziest things. And I thought to myself, didn't he already do this? Didn't he already drug test everybody, kick everyone off welfare, just, do as much as he could to get rid of all these programs?
I'm impressed, Igor. Yes. You are. Paul LePage doesn't have the highest profile, even though I agree. I think he is one of the most colorful characters in a governor's
he's on my
mansion.
radar.
He's on. Yeah,
Yes.
he would be on your radar. I
Yeah.
guess that makes sense. But you're right. He did already do this. But here's the difference. In 2011, the legislature in Maine approved a limited drug testing program, but this was blowing up at the time, and Florida had one where Rick Scott was famously rebuffed by courts. So other states that had pursued this were like, well, let's wait for these legal battles to shake out. And so it wasn't until January of this year that they started a limited drug testing program in which they only sent a drug-related questionnaire to recipients of the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program who also happen to have a drug-related felony conviction in their background. So this is a very narrow range of people who they were testing, and the narrowness was, they made it that way so that they wouldn't get sued and have to go to court and have their program stopped. So in the intervening time, Paul LePage and other Republicans in Maine basically ran on doing more of this kind of stuff. They campaigned on it, and they were successful. And now even Democrats in Maine are on board with some of these ideas. For instance, they've also got a bill to stop people on food stamps from buying junk food.
Ugh.
And so Democrats are like, the welfare reform message is resonating there. So Paul LePage comes back and says, you know what? I don't want to just drug test the convicted felon. I want to drug test everybody on this program, and that's what his new proposal calls for. And also, instead of just drug testing people with felony convictions, you're out. Under this new proposal, you would just be disallowed from having benefits. And that is a relic of the 1990s, a welfare reform provision passed with no debate, added to that big welfare reform law and welfare as we know it, Bill Clinton, with just no debate at all. They said, you know what, let's not let felons, ex-cons who've already been in prison, have benefits.
You know, whenever I watch Paul LePage or read articles like this, I always think he's on drugs. And so I don't know if they drug test the governor, if that's a policy.
They don't.
They don't. Oh.
How
convenient.
People who are opposed to drug testing proposals for poverty relief programs often say, well, you know what? If we're going to make them pee in a cup for a taxpayer benefit, we should too, because our salaries are paid by the taxpayer. And you can't do it.
Why not?
Because the courts have said no.
So the courts have said you can't drug test the governor to make sure and the elected officials of the legislature to make sure they're on the up and up, but you can drug test welfare recipients.
Yeah, you can drug test certain people with government jobs that are safety sensitive, like train conductors. You can drug test poor people who want government benefits.
How is the governor not a safety-sensitive job?
You can drug test students, but it's an unconstitutional barrier to impose a drug test for public office. I confess I forget which amendment we're talking about right now, but I remember having looked at this before, and you just can't. It's as constitutional as some of the things that get proposed, but there's a serious problem with making people pee in a cup if they want to be an elected official.
Well, I just really want just Paul LePage. I mean, I don't really care about
nobody else.
You know what? They don't even say poor people are on drugs. We got to test them. They just say theoretically it would be terrible if welfare benefits were spent on drugs. They in Maine or anywhere, it is never posited that this is an actual problem. It's all about the symbolism and the idea. And that's why I think this one from Paul LePage might get stiff opposition from Democrats in Maine. But Republicans are happy just to talk about these ideas, even if they don't become law.
Now, how effective are these policies? Because A, how large is the problem? And B, how much do they do in terms of making sure those dollars don't go towards, I guess, drug users?
Well, they don't do this, but if you do look at the data, their unemployed populations do have more of a drug thing than everyday.
They use drugs at higher rates than...
Yeah. However, when the several states that have tried to do these programs since 2011 have implemented them, they haven't caught anybody. It's been like an overall rate of 1%. Think Progress did a great roundup of who have the states caught when they've run these programs, and they haven't caught anybody. Florida did blanket testing of everyone seeking TANF for several months in 2011, and it was 2% of people who tested positive for drugs. And the proponents will say, well, that's just so low because the drug addicts walked away from the test. But if you go further and look at people who didn't finish their application, it's still not true. So it's an imaginary problem.
So you're saying it's not catching people because the people who tend to do drugs in very heavy numbers don't apply for the benefits to begin with because they are only concerned about the drugs.
Right. You could talk about poor people or unemployed people, but you're not talking about the specific subset of people who get benefits from these programs, because these programs have, the TANF, the result of the welfare reform law, has just withered in the proportion of poor people who are eligible for it who actually receive benefits. So it's a very small subset of people. It's often single moms with little children.
And there are work requirements.
Yeah.
And so for you to be a heavy drug user and have children and go to work, it's challenging.
I mean, to go through the hassle of applying for these programs and not have it together, it's easy to see why you would have such a low result. And Paul LePage, they don't care.
And how much money are they wasting on this? I mean, this kind of testing has to cost the taxpayer a pretty penny.
Well, it's expensive. If you actually make everyone pee in a cup, that costs a good amount, because it's $20 to $40 for one of those tests.
Each.
Yeah.
Yeah, each cup.
So so that's really expensive. But what most states are doing now is they give you a form first. And
so you self-identify? You self-identify.
Yeah, so
How does that...
Maybe it's a cry for help, or you're not being strategic. But if you say on one of these forms, "Yeah, I'm on drugs," they will say, "Well, okay, we're gonna drug test you." So the forms, one would assume cost much less.
I see. 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. The Bill Press Show for this Tuesday, May 19th. Arthur Delaney in studio with us. We'll be back right after this.
This is the Bill Press Show.
When I started learning about nutrition, about which, by the way, much less is known than you might think, I learned that what mattered most about one's health was not necessarily the nutrients, good or bad, that you were consuming or staying away from, or even the calorie counts. But what predicted a healthy diet more than anything else is the fact that it was being cooked by a human being and not a corporation. Corporations cook very differently than people do. They use vast amounts of salt, fat, and sugar, much more than you would ever use in your own cooking. And the reason they do that is those are three incredibly attractive and incredibly cheap ingredients. And when they're layered properly, as in a chip or pastries and forms of junk food, they're incredibly addictive. They really press our buttons. They activate our dopamine network, our cravings. And in fact, people in the industry, they don't talk about addiction in the food industry, even though they traffic in addiction. They talk about craveability. It's the same thing. And snackability is another term they use. It's a lovely word. And then the last point about corporate cooking that's important to understand is they cook different stuff than you do at home. What they're good at, in general, they don't cook that well, but things like chips, they cook incredibly well. And here's a classic food that if you make it yourself, if you've ever made French fries, you have to wash the potatoes, you have to peel the potatoes, you have to slice the potatoes, you have to fry them in a lot of oil, you have to spatter your entire stovetop, you have to clean up, and then you have this pot of oil you have to get rid of. I mean, it's really difficult, and it's a pain. They're wonderful, but it's a pain. And if you make them yourself, you'll only eat them every 6 weeks, 2 months, because it's too much work. But when you let corporations cook for you, it's so simple and so inexpensive, and they're really good, that you will have them twice a day, as many people in America do. So you see the kinds of foods you end up with are these labor-intensive foods and desserts. These special occasion foods become everyday foods when we let industry cook for us. Eat anything you want, just cook it yourself.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
All right, 47 minutes after the hour, The Bill Press Show for this Tuesday, May 19th, joined, of course, in studio by Arthur Delaney. If it's Tuesday and 6:30, it's you, sir. So
A.M. Eastern Time.
A.M. Eastern Time, yes, exactly. So
my time.
Your time to shine. Paul LePage, it turns out, who we've just been discussing, wants to drug test everybody in the state of Maine, except for himself, apparently, isn't the only Republican who is on on this crusade to try to drug test welfare recipients. Scott Walker, who's, of course, making so far an unofficial bid for the presidency, but is going to announce any moment now, he promises, also championed a lot of these reforms in the state of Wisconsin and is, in a way, campaigning on them now as he makes that White House bid. What is he doing?
Well, he campaigned for re-election in Wisconsin on the idea of drug testing for food stamps, welfare, harsher work requirements, and he was successful. And he talks about this in the early states where Republicans must go, and it's reportedly a big applause line. I haven't been to Iowa myself, but am informed.
But you hear the applause all the way in D.C. It's that popular.
Yeah.
It carries over.
This issue of harsher rules for people who get public benefits is one that has been snowballing for the entire Obama era. It really kicked off in 2011, thought it would die down, but now such luminaries as Scott Walker, we're not just talking about the Paul LePages of the governorships. Even the big cheese himself thinks this is an idea with national resonance, and they are working on this right now in Wisconsin. They're doing drug testing for public benefits, for welfare, for food stamps, albeit these proposals are as watered down as they need to be in order not to be immediately shot down by the federal government and the courts. But they have all the symbolic value that I think even a totally unconstitutional proposal would have. They're also doing this thing that has really caught fire this year, which is restricting what food stamps buy.
No junk food. No Red Bull.
They want to restrict it to healthy food that is prescribed under a separate program for pregnant women.
Oh.
And then the food industry in Wisconsin was like, well, wait a minute, no. People are going to buy all this food that we make money on. So they put these loopholes in it for all dairy products.
Of course.
Which one lawmaker there pointed out to me means a food stamp recipient could spend all their monthly allotment on Dippin' Dots.
Yes.
So they were
Who wouldn't
confronted
want
by
to?
these lobbyists, and it was, so it's really, there's a lot of symbolism here. It's not the most serious policy.
You make the point, I think, in your piece that, we have come away from a period when politicians were tough on crime, and we saw a lot of the conditions that kind of created the Baltimore uprising and some of the other disturbances around the country where police adopted tactics that really alienated them from the community and increased incarceration rates, particularly in places like Baltimore. And now there's really bipartisan consensus that policies like that went too far, that they kind of overcorrected the crime problem that we had in the 90s. It's not the same thing when you talk about welfare. We had welfare reform in the 90s. We dramatically shrunk the program. We included work requirements.
Yeah.
But politicians, even though those reforms haven't really haven't shrunk poverty or haven't helped tremendously more people find jobs, they're still pushing in that same direction. Why do you think that is?
It's amazing. The food stamp felon ban in the welfare reform bill is like the most 90s thing ever. It's a mix of tough on crime and cracking down on welfare all at once. And it is amazing to see the tough on crime so repudiated, such widespread agreement that the war on drugs has been a mistake and a failure. In Baltimore, the ultimate symbol of how tough on crime policing,
how wrong it could all go,
how badly it goes, and yet the welfare reform has just remained in a time capsule, and the politics of cracking down on welfare polls extremely well. Like, should we have drug tests for some subset of people on welfare? I think it's above 90%. That idea's approval rating. So it's just totally popular as ever. And I don't know exactly what accounts for that. Are the politics the same, or is it for a new reason that these ideas are so big right now?
Yeah, it would be interesting to see why that is, but it just feels to me like, those poor people. Oh, those poor people, they probably do drugs. They're not us.
The idea of this of the welfare reform politics as Democrats practiced it in the 90s is we're going to get white working class voters to support us with this sort of point out that these poorer people on benefits are not the constituency we're here for. We're going to crack down on that, and this is an electoral strategy that'll get Republicans to stop beating us up over welfare. And it worked for like 10 years, and it's really not the same dynamic anymore.
And I wonder if there's an economic component here. You're not saving a lot of money, obviously. In some cases, you're spending it. But to say to voters, hey, we're not going to waste your money in this era of high deficits and shrinking incomes and everything else.
It's like the TANF program is minuscule. It represents 3% of overall federal safety net spending. And yet it's soaking up like 80% of the public debate in Congress and the states on this topic. So I think it's very symbolic, and it's something that Republicans can talk about without alienating everyone on Social Security and Medicare.
That's right.
These much bigger programs that actually do have some structural big money issues that's someone's got to look at eventually.
All right, 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. Mr. Delaney, thank you as always. But the Bill Press Show continues with campaign reporter Jonathan Easley joins us next to discuss the 2016 election. Keep it right here on the Bill Press Show.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Before now, it's been difficult for criminals like us to know which states have loose gun laws. How would a criminal like me know which states permit me to carry loaded guns in their amusement parks, golf courses, or beaches?
I have some violent friends. We all wear leather jackets and scream at women. And we want to find out which states we can buy and sell guns easily.
CrimAdvisor.com. That's the site to find out where it's easiest for felons and fugitives to buy, carry, and even traffic guns.
That's why I love Arizona, where I can go see the beautiful Grand Canyon and carry a loaded gun without even having to get a background check.
You would fail that background check.
I'm sure of it. Now, what about a road trip? What states can I go to fill my trunk with guns and take it back home for my even more dangerous friends?
CrimAdvisor has a list for that.
That's so unreasonable.
Our traffickers' top 10.
Nevada. What happens in Vegas may have to stay in Vegas, but your guns don't. Bring them over to California and sell them.
The market up there is hungry for guns.
I understand that CrimAdvisor.com will tell me which states really cater to us criminals and creeps, but what about the states where we're not so welcome? The ones that don't get us?
I don't even like saying the name of these states, but California, Connecticut, Maryland, and New York all have laws to keep guns out of the hands of people like us.
I want to shoot California so bad.
Boo, California.
Boo, go home. Wow. CrimAdvisor.com has all this information?
Sure does.
CrimAdvisor.com. Plan your perfect getaway. Oh, like TripAdvisor.
Oh.
You wouldn't let money just blow out of your house. So when your AC or heater is on, make sure the doors, windows, and fireplace flue are shut tight. If you're headed out, turn down the AC or lower the heat by 10 degrees. And always keep your water heater set at 120. A little bit of common sense goes a long way. Get more great tips at energysaver.gov.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
This is the Bill Press Show.
All right, 57 minutes after the hour on this Tuesday, May 19th. Peter, I don't know if you saw this story, but Adnan Syed, who is the, of course, centerpiece of the first season of Serial, that podcast that grew so popular, is getting a new break in his case. His case is going to be remanded to a trial court and is going to consider new evidence that came out during the Serial podcast and could potentially lead to a new trial for him.
It all centers around this potential alibi in the case.
That's
Asia
right.
McClain.
Asia
McClain. Well, look, there's maybe a season 2 with Adnan Syed after all. We're back after this.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Tune into Free Speech TV for Democracy Now!, a national, independent, award-winning news program bringing you people and perspectives rarely seen on corporate media.
I'm the retired bishop with the Episcopal Church as the bishop for all chaplains in federal service. I read that there was a group of people that represented a sense of injustice that I had. We'd lost Zuccotti. I mean, there was a kind of a hope that maybe Trinity Church would be gracious and give refuge. We picked this day where we would gather and demonstrate that Trinity was closing its ears to what was happening. We marched around the block, and I realized that, my goodness, they're carrying a ladder. And I thought, well, this is the moment. You could feel a spiritual presence. You could feel a certain something. And then the cops came in. It got brutal.
I'm with you right here. Robin, I'm here.
The church needed, in this moment in history, to stand along of these protesters. The truth of Christ is found in the pews, is found in the institutional church, but it is also found in the streets. It's found in the honesty and the integrity, the insistence of people that you find in Occupy Wall Street.
Tune in to Gay USA with hosts Ann Northrup and Andy Hum for in-depth coverage of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender news. Watch Gay USA every week, only on Free Speech TV.
I'm a Piston fan. Their slogan was, "We come to work." That's what Detroit about. That's why they used it. It's a team thing. They won 2 championships, a team. There was no star. No mayor can come in here and be a star. It's a team thing. No governors can come in here and think you can do it by yourself. It's a team thing. You got communities. They got ideas too. The only thing wrong with Detroit, people have lost hope here. Residents, city workers, so much corruption. They lose hope. But I grew up here. I love this city. I think it can come back. I've been working for the city 24 and a half years. Within the last 10 years, we took 4 pay cuts and then an additional 10% wage cut. I've lost a home.
When you take all of the decisions out of the city of Detroit, all of us, then what do you have? Exactly what we got, a lot of problems. Every time the city seems to fall into a problem, it's always on the backs of us workers.
You wake up out of a dead sleep and you jump behind the wheel and take off driving.
and try to get everybody there safe, not knowing really what you're pulling up to. I'm not eligible for Social Security, so the pension is my sole salary at this point.
We've been in business here 39 years. We've seen a lot of changes in Detroit. The area was a lot of industry, a lot of city workers. It's getting very tough for the city workers. It's getting tough for us as a business people.
Response times are increasing because of the closing of companies, which takes your insurance rate through the roof. So all the things that affect us affect the citizens.
I worked for the city in different capacities for 29 years. I feel like an old jacket. They use me up and they throw me away. In my condition, nobody's gonna hire me. I'm 68 years old. Half the times, I can't get my blood pressure medicine. It's either feeding myself, blood pressure, or paying bills.
$754. By the time they take all the deductions for I have my car insurance, my house insurance, and my health insurance taken out. So the time they take all that, I'll get about $300 after they take all that out. I don't understand it. I can't see how the governor is allowing this to happen and what they're doing and they want to blame it all on the seniors. Not only the seniors, but the city workers. And we worked hard. I know I worked hard.
I've been in Detroit since 1946. I was 14 years old when I came in. I don't live large at all. I wish I could. I don't know when the last time I've been shopping. I only get $1,100, and I'm 81 years old, and I need every penny that I can get and that I do get. And I'm very, very upset about the idea of them taking away my pensions that I worked 30 years for.
I think it's terrible that they talk about Detroit like they do, because Detroit has been very good to me.
I have a lot of city workers coming in with their uniforms on, Detroit Water Department, Police Department, Fire Department. I get a lot of people, the Border Patrol come in. So if I lose that customer base, I'm going to be in a position where I might have to close down. If they take away their pensions, if they start cutting jobs, it's going to cut into a large percentage of not only our business, but other businesses that are in the city of Detroit. We're here. We've been here for 26 years. We're still trying to do business in the city.
Detroiters are survivors. They tough. They adapt. But only can do so much when your politicians ahead of you and we're not on the same team. We're not going to let Detroit be erased, bulldozed, or wherever. We're going to fight to the bitter end. Detroit going to survive.
Broadcasting around the nation, on your radio, on your TV, and online. This is the Bill Press Show.
Are there enough podiums in the world for all of the Republicans who want to run for president this year? I don't know. That's the question, though, we're asking on this Tuesday, May 19th, 2015. Good morning. Welcome to the Bill Press Show. I'm Igor Volsky of Think Progress, sitting in for Bill Press, who's in Cuba buying gifts for me for next week. Yeah. So he's there. I'm here along with Peter Ogburn, Elisa Murphy running the board.
Good morning.
Jamie Benson taking your calls at 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377, and Cyprian Bolding running our video stream on youtube.com/TawkrTV. You, of course, are also listening to us on your favorite progressive radio station or on our apps, the iHeart app and on the TuneIn app using the Progressive Voices channel. We're going to be joined in a moment by Jonathan Easley, campaign reporter for The Hill, who's going to tell us, do they make podiums narrow enough to fit all of the 2016 Republicans in that first debate that's going to be in August that we all just can't wait for? You know, how are they even going to do that? They ask one question. There's like 20 of them. They're going to have like 2 seconds to, I don't even know. We'll find out with him. But first, Peter.
This is the Full Court Press.
Yes, indeed. Just a couple of other stories making news. I hate this idea. I just want to go on record right off the bat and say I hate this idea. But Starbucks has partnered with Spotify for online music streaming. Now, here's how this is going to work. Baristas will be given control of the playlists inside individual Starbucks.
Oh, I smell trouble.
Not only that, customers can put their songs on a Spotify playlist to play inside of Starbucks. Now, you've seen this happen with Uber. You know, if you get an Uber, you can start playing your music through Spotify into the Uber car, which is fine, I think, because it's just you.
But is it okay if we go into a place and there's new music we haven't heard? Like, do we always have to have our music in the Uber, in the Starbucks? Let's just listen to other people's music and see if we like it.
I know what I like.
And we don't like what you like. We don't want to listen to what you want to listen to.
No one wants to listen to what I'm listening to. No one.
I mean, something from the 50s, probably. Yeah.
What?
And a lot of the times you go to Starbucks to like work or something, and now it's like Club Starbucks.
Yeah, I don't like this. I hate this.
Although it would be fun to turn Starbucks into like a dance club. Yeah. So you walk in and you're like grooving.
Only techno.
Yeah.
Perfect. I mean, there will be probably a lot more people going to Starbucks now to do this, but those people are probably douchebags with bad musical tastes. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, you already have the music in your headphones that you refuse to take out as you place your order.
Why are you going to share your crappy taste with everybody else?
That's right.
All right. Congratulations, Washington, D.C. A new study took a look at the fittest cities in America. Washington, D.C. is number one. That is a study from the American College of Sports Medicine. They cite the numerous walking and cycle paths, wide sidewalks, and plenty of parks to make Washington, D.C. the fittest city in the nation. Any guesses on number two?
California.
Sorry, Minneapolis.
Ooh,
really?
Comes in second, which is odd. Want to know what the worst is? Bottom two.
Alabama. Mississippi.
No, I would have guessed that too. The bottom is Indianapolis. Sorry.
I'm going home today with that information.
Right.
All right.
I knew you would love that.
I love it.
I knew you would love that. And some sad news, Igor. I know you're going to be heartbroken over this. Sarah Palin announced in a Facebook post yesterday that her daughter Bristol and her fiancé Dakota Meyer have called off their wedding.
Aww.
You know that this Dakota Meyer is a Medal of Honor. Like, this guy's like
the Marine, right?
A Marine. He's a legitimate war hero. So he got engaged to Bristol Palin not that long ago at like a country and western music concert. And so they just...
It is so upsetting to hear this news like this. They could have at least emailed me, will Alaska Airlines refund my ticket? I don't even know anymore.
Sorry.
I mean, it cost a lot for me to go up there. Now
there have been some tabloid stories, by the way, about the fact that Dakota Meyer had a secret wife who he had married and then divorced very quietly around the time that he met Bristol Palin.
Well, whatever. Do what you got to do to marry into the Palins. I'm all for it.
Do what you got to do to marry into that family.
Yeah.
There you go.
What could go wrong?
Sure.
All right. Not Bristol Palin, Sarah Palin and Bristol Palin appear to be the only two Republicans who are not running for president this year. Jonathan Easley, campaign reporter for The Hill, welcome to the program. I've been going on and on about this. I just don't understand how there could be so many, because now we're hearing that Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal, former Pennsylvania Governor Rick Santorum, are moving towards announcing something, probably a run, in the coming weeks. I mean, how many more Republicans can we get until we reach full saturation?
Yeah, I mean, and you've got John Kasich talking about getting in. Rick Perry still moving towards a run. I mean, the field's getting larger. It's not getting smaller. The only person who's officially taken themselves out so far is former ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton. So, I mean... and then you still got the two front runners haven't gotten in yet, Jeb Bush and Scott Walker. So, what I think is happening here is everyone is seeing how big the field is and saying, why not me? No one's taking more than 10 or 15% support nationally. Why couldn't I catch fire and move to the top of that field? So, we're going to see the field going to keep getting larger all the way through the summer, I think.
See, if I'm a Republican Party heavyweight, I'm concerned because in that kind of situation, the incentives are to be as flashy as possible, to say the craziest thing just to get noticed. I mean, this is a real problem, I think, for a party that after they lost in 2012 said, well, if we could just moderate our positions on a few issues, we could actually win. That's not going to happen this time around because, they got to appeal to the most conservative base of their party in Iowa, in South Carolina, and they're going to say and do crazy things, which reporters like you and me are like really excited about. But if you're trying to win a presidency, that's not so good.
No, you're right. I mean, they're fighting for oxygen in this thing already. I mean, there's all these top spinning as it is in South Carolina, New Hampshire, Iowa every single day. There's countless events these guys are holding, and there's not really enough oxygen to support all of them. So, the media attention is going to go to the ones that slipped up, that said the craziest thing, that, and I think some of these candidates do think they're going to have to be moving to the right or doing some extreme things to really get attention. So, I think Republicans take solace in the fact that they think it's a stronger field than 2012 when there were also a lot of candidates up on the stage during the debates, but the quality of the candidate probably doesn't match what they have in 2016. But, yeah, it's still an issue. I mean, the field is just unbelievably big, and to get that attention, it's going to go to maybe some of the ones that are either slipping up or doing some of the most extreme things.
Now, the person who appears to have caught fire over the weekend, and I didn't watch her speech, so I wanted to ask you about it, is Carly Fiorina, the former HP executive, advisor to McCain and Romney. She ran for Senate in California and lost. What is going on with her? My take has always been she has these really sharp stabs at the Clintons, but doesn't actually have any real substance in terms of policy to bring to the conversation. Is she really catching fire with the party?
I mean, I don't think you can say she's really catching fire if you look at the polls. I mean, she barely registers. And, she's been doing this kind of for a while. I remember at CPAC, there was kind of the same buzz, after her speech. She's been a really effective Republican attack dog against the Clintons in particular. And I think a lot of these Republicans in the field, the rest of the candidates are men, are kind of taking their cues from her on how to maybe go after Hillary Clinton and as far as tone goes and that kind of thing. But we've seen this pretty consistently, I think, where she generates quite a bit of buzz after giving, a fiery speech, and then you just don't really see any kind of bump in the polls. But I think she's definitely going to be, I think a lot of Republicans would like to see her up on the stage, to have a woman up there. And also she could be probably fighting for, I'd say it's probably a long shot for vice president, but maybe, a commerce secretary position or something like that.
Oh, the coveted commerce secretary appointment. Yes, of course.
Right.
I think
that's what it's all about,
Who is, I guess, with Jeb Bush fumbling on the Iraq question this past week and kind of demonstrating that he may not be ready for prime time, having run his last campaign in 2002, who do you think is going to benefit most from kind of the deflation of oh my God, it's inevitable, it's going to be Jeb? Who is it? Is it Rubio? Is it Scott Walker? I mean, they seem to be doing well in the money game. They seem to be on top of a lot of the polls coming out of Iowa. Jeb's fumbles are their kind of wins, right?
Well, it should be Marco Rubio. He should be the biggest beneficiary of that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any Republicans you talk to will say that that as good as he looks and as nice as the bounces he's gotten, he still needs Jeb Bush to stumble somehow. That Bush is still kind of an insurmountable obstacle for him, at least at this point. Now he's moved to the top of the field and done well kind of on his own without Bush stumbling, but I think this stumble does have people taking another look at Marco. But I think Marco also kind of flubbed the same question over the weekend. Yep. He went on one of the Sunday shows and really muddled his answer on what he would have, how he felt about Iraq and what he would have done, and kind of did the same thing that Jeb Bush did. He, trying to parse or make the distinction that knowing what we know now, maybe he wouldn't have gone into Iraq then, but it's been a success, or it was good to take out Saddam Hussein. Kind of trying to have it both ways, I think, in the same way that Jeb Bush got in trouble. So, he had a pretty bad few minutes, I think, on national television over the weekend, where he kind of made the same mistake as Jeb Bush. And national security is supposed to be his primary issue, so I don't think he can afford to have many more moments like that.
That Rubio answer was painful and dragged out over several minutes. But it also begs the question, why the hell can't anybody answer that question, this Iraq question? It's coming. Everybody's going to get it, and none of the Republicans have given a great answer on it yet.
Right. I mean, it seems like it's one of the first things that you would want to be prepared to tackle going into this. I mean, with Jeb Bush, at least you understand, I think, a little bit why. It's his brother's, responsible for this.
Right.
But with Marco, it's a little bit more curious. I mean, I guess, maybe Republicans don't want to be seen as just going into full attack mode against another Republican administration or what it is necessarily.
I think that the polling here must be very split in terms of what the base wants in Iraq. I think some of them are not happy that it happened. Others want a strong foreign security candidate, and so they're trying to kind of split down the middle, but it's not making either side happy.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, some of the most hawkish voices in the party. I mean, we just had I brought up John Bolton just because he bowed out, but I mean, he still has some influence in the party, and he's all in gung ho that going into Iraq was the right thing to do. So you're right. There's that hawkish wing that I think is maybe never going to be apologetic about why things went down and how they went down, and I think that part of the party still has quite a bit of influence, and so maybe some of these candidates are trying to have it both ways.
And the other problem on Iraq is that they never had kind of a sit down, the Republicans, and had an honest conversation about what went wrong. Because they keep on saying, all the intelligence said he had weapons of mass destruction, we all thought he did, and that's just not true. I mean, that's just not true. When you run your own intelligence shop out of the White House, when you cherry pick intelligence and when you ignore what the UN inspectors found and then claim that, oh my God, we all thought they had weapons, so of course we went in, you can't have an honest conversation, and you find yourself in the situation where you're kind of chasing your tail on this issue and you can't give a real answer because you can't really speak to what happened. You have to hold up and lift up this mythology that everyone in the world thought Saddam Hussein was a threat, which just isn't the case.
Right. Well said. I mean, that's, it's one that I don't know if it needs to be as tricky necessarily as they're making it. So, I mean, when Jeb Bush first flubbed it, I think he had kind of a prepared answer, but he gave that answer to the wrong question almost. Like he was, and I think he just kind of confused himself, and then he didn't do a good job recovering from it. But if someone asks you if you know now, if you knew then what we know now, would you go into Iraq? It seems pretty clear to me that the answer would be no.
Yeah, and I think this is really an opening for Rand Paul. If you're talking about people who are trying to get noticed, who want to get a good bump out of this, I think Rand Paul has the right message on this, which is Iraq was a mistake, the Bush doctrine was a mistake, and we need to pave a new path as a Republican Party and vote for me.
Right. No, absolutely. And I mean, national security has been such a big issue, among Republicans, I think, in the early going. And I think most strategists would tell you that's bad news for Rand Paul. But, I mean, you keep seeing these guys who are supposed to be among the foremost experts in the party, Marco Rubio in particular. Jeb Bush is well-respected, I think, in those circles on the issue. You keep seeing them mess up like this. And, Rand Paul can talk about these things in a really, convincing manner. He knows what he's talking about. It's just that he differs with most of the party. It could absolutely be an opening for him to get his message across.
I mean, you have to think that Rand Paul's position on Iraq polls better with the general electorate than Jeb Bush's positions. Right?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to find out because he's going to take that message and he's confident in it. I mean, he's got kind of the stump line where, every time we knock out a secular dictator in the Middle East, things go to hell. So, he's got a stump line. It's already kind of incorporated in in his campaign, and now he's got these issues that he can highlight where other candidates have stumbled, or it's unclear what they believe necessarily, and why not,
All right.
maybe you can get people to buy into his position.
All right, Jonathan Easley, the campaign reporter for The Hill. I have to cut this interview short because going on further would offend the troops, I think. Thank you so much for being with us. 22 minutes after the hour. We'll be back here on The Bill Press Show.
This is The Bill Press Show.
I have run these canyons for 6 million years. I have traveled from the Rocky Mountains to the deserts, through scorching heat and freezing cold, from the land of the dinosaurs to fields of food.
I lend my hand to 7 states, 2 countries, 9 national parks,
and 36 million people across an arid West.
I am not the strongest or the largest, but I am the hardest working.
People love me.
My playfulness,
My beauty.
my power.
My life. But I don't think I can offer any more.
I am tired.
I am tired,
tapped,
and tied. Of the hundreds of major rivers in the world, I am one of the few who no longer kisses the sea.
Battles to harness my soul have been won and lost. Use me wisely, and I will sustain you.
Use me like you have, and I will break. My name
is
Red. The Grand River Red. The American Nile.
The Canyon Maker. I am the Colorado River.
And I am the most endangered river in America.
At Earth Justice, we defend the environment in the courtroom. Join our fight. When you take a seat, you take a stand. Earth Justice, because the Earth needs a good lawyer.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
27 minutes after the hour, Representative Dan Kildee of Michigan will join us in the next half hour. But Peter, now, since so many Republicans are struggling to answer the Iraq question, I will model the perfect answer to the Iraq question.
Great.
And it goes like this.
Go ahead.
Yes. Invading Iraq was a mistake. We sadly lost 4,425 American lives, 32,223 American soldiers wounded, and 405,000 Iraqis died because of our mistake. We developed a policy and we fit that intelligence around the policy we wanted, not the other way around. We made false predictions about the occupation and what that would look like, and we proved to not be able to build a political, stable government in Iraq, because that's up to the Iraqis and not to us. How's that?
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty
Those
good.
are the mistakes that we will learn from, and as your president, I promise not to repeat them. Dan Kildee, next.
This is The Bill Press Show.
This is my computer.
This is your computer. Let's go on the internet.
Let's go. Click it.
Yes.
Okay.
I cursor in between the R and the E. When I say dot, I want you to just push the period.
She's gonna love me all over again.
That's it. Jamaica, here you come.
Here we go.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. And I did it by myself. Feel smarter.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
All right. I know this isn't any fun to talk about, but we should. Okay. So who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice.
And I'll try to get the generator going without any gas.
Oh, let's not forget the cell phones, which probably won't work.
Right.
And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
Well, I think we couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
Hey, thanks for stopping by. You know, I followed your character since the first episode. I'm a big fan. Big fan.
Thank you.
And listen, your storyline, it makes for incredible TV drama. Thing is, your drug use is very adult content. Too adult for the kids. So I'm gonna have to block you.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Well, have a good one.
You're a nice lady.
The most valuable morning radio show, according to The Nation magazine. This is The Bill Press Show.
33 minutes after the hour, The Bill Press Show for this Tuesday, May 19th, 2015. Shifting gears a bit away from Iraq and Jeb Bush to the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The Senate will vote on fast-track authority, allowing the president to get that deal through without any amendments from Congress. Joining me now in studio, Representative Dan Kildee from Michigan 5th District. Congressman, welcome to the show.
The Fightin' Fifth.
The Fightin' Fifth.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
So you just came back from Japan, Vietnam, Myanmar, where you kind of were on the ground and got a real sense for what is going on in these countries, whether or not they'll be able to implement what the president calls the most progressive trade deal ever. But before we get to that, let me get your sense of the president's reaction to this debate, because to me, it's really been spectacular. And we saw this a bit during the Don't Ask, Don't Tell debate, where the president just got so angry when anyone pushed him on it and said, are you going to do it? Are you going to do it? When are you going to repeal it? And here we are with progressives like yourself, Elizabeth Warren, Democrats, other Democrats in the House and in the Senate, challenging him on his trade policy. And he's just, saying things that I would never imagine he'd say about other Democrats. What do you make of that?
Well, I have to admit it's disappointing, and I support the president on most of his policy. In fact, I can find very few exceptions where I don't support him. But on this one, the president's just flat wrong. He's wrong in terms of the policy, in the way he's managing this in terms of the politics. It's not constructive. Members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, not only have a legitimate role, we have the only constitutionally defined role in regulating trade among nations. So the notion that somehow we are being treated almost like interlopers into this process, and we should just sort of sit down, be quiet, and let him get his work done, which is sort of the approach that it's felt like, it's not constructive. It does not help. And it's not helping his cause, because many of the members who might otherwise be open on this question, not myself because I know too much about it, but some of the members that are open to it.
There's no going back.
There's no going back now. They have not been impressed with the way in which the president has conducted this. Now, have we had lots of discussions about it with him? Sure. But the answers that we're getting and the access to the documents themselves are so basic. It's not transparent. Parts of it, it's obtuse. We don't even see the proposals from other countries. The only language that we get access to is the language that has been agreed to. And some of that, there are redactions that make it very difficult to see and understand the full context.
Now, have you gone to the top secret room to read the top secret agreement without taking notes, any of your staff members, or your phone, and then being sworn to secrecy as you leave, not to discuss it here with me?
We have done some of that, but I have to admit, it's not a productive exercise in many ways.
Shock!
That doesn't sound productive the way I described it.
No, it doesn't sound productive, no.
So I had a choice between that or going to baseball practice. No, it's been frustrating. I've been to a lot of the briefings, seen a lot of the documents, gone through the text, and it's difficult to discern. For one thing, I'm a relatively intelligent person, relatively.
Yeah, well,
after
it's all relative.
I'm a member of Congress.
Yes. That's right.
But
what's your comparison point there?
Right.
Yeah, I hear you.
I mean, I've been doing public policy my entire life, and I have a fairly good handle on all this. But it's difficult to understand some of the elements outside of the context and without the help of experts that I rely upon, and even the advisors that have been tapped by the administration to provide guidance don't feel like they've had, there's a really good article in Politico this morning on this, don't feel like they've had good access to the documentation in a way that makes it meaningful. So for the president, and again, don't get me wrong, I have been standing with and behind this president on a lot of big fights, but I don't pledge loyalty to a president or to a party. I work for the people who sent me here. I come from Flint, Michigan. And when I start looking at trade deals and think about the history of trade deals, and I hear the same language and same descriptions and the same assurances and the same sort of warnings, oh, this is different, this is different, this is different. They're different in the same way. It's just a different time and a different place. And I think it's really, it's disappointing that what might end up being the defining battle, at least in the second term of this presidency, and maybe one of the defining battles of his presidency, is sort of fall into this place where he found it necessary not just to disagree with other fellow Democrats, other members of Congress, but to impugn the integrity of those members. We don't do that. We don't do that.
Why do you think he's doing this? I mean, as a candidate for president, he spoke out against NAFTA. He spoke out about trade agreements like the TPP because, frankly, they have provisions, labor standards, environmental standards that we simply can't enforce in the countries that we're going to be trading with. What changed, do you think? What changed between 2007, 2008, when he went to places that were so impacted by NAFTA, when factories closed and moved to Mexico, and he railed against these deals and promised a more progressive trade policy? And now here he is working out a deal that many critics, including yourself, say, this is NAFTA 2.0.
I think the problem here is that very often trade deals are not about trade. And I think that's really what's happening here. And I think that's the mistake, is that trade is being used as a tool in the geopolitical struggle for what's happening in Asia. And it's really a part of the U.S. position to try to offset the emerging role of China in the region.
Because he says, if you don't approve this thing, China's going to write the rules and we're going to be left behind.
Right, which means that there's only two paths. This thing or China takes over, which is an oversimplification. First of all, while it would have been a tough lift to get some of us to go down this path in the first place, if there had been, number one, a robust and included provision on currency manipulation, which would prevent some of the big losses that we've faced, that would have helped a lot. Secondly, much stronger language on enforceability and much stronger language on labor rights, for example. And the problem with all of this, and this is really the thing that frustrates a lot of us, is that on one hand, the president is saying, well, tell us what's wrong with this. Be specific. Point out.
Yeah.
And we're trying to be as specific as we can. On the other hand, we don't have access to a lot of the documentation. And the access that we do have comes under this first ever cloak of secrecy, and a lot of it's classified, where in the past these documents haven't been classified. To me, the difficulty is we're being put in a position of having to sort of shadow box. We can't really talk about the specifics to the extent that we would like to, because we either A, don't have access to them, or B, the information is classified. And then the president's view, and it's not just the president, those who are advocating on behalf of this agreement say, well, tell us specifically what the problem is.
I think you hit a really, really interesting point there, because we don't want to get too bogged down in the process, but the process for this particular issue is very important, and it's a major roadblock to this being a transparent and open thing. What's the precedent for the way that they're doing this? Have you ever like this?
No.
The secret room that we've talked about? Yeah, right. Have you ever seen this before?
Not since I was in 6th grade in Catholic school. No.
Oh, they're using that process. How reassuring.
Right.
No, of course, this is the first trade agreement that I and most members of Congress have had to deal with. I mean, there's been a sea change in terms of membership. I'm in my second term. But I have been, obviously involved in local government and representing my home community, a pretty close observer of past trade deals. And I've not seen anything quite like this. Now, admittedly, it's a far more complicated deal. It's nearly 40% of the global economy is affected by this trade deal, which to me elevates the need for us to be very careful and very sort of thoughtful about this whole thing. The other thing that bothers me about this is that there's not like this great big NAFTA clock on the wall ticking down to the date at which point the whole thing kind of blows up. We should do this right. 40% of the global economy. And I'm hearing that, we really can't put currency in this deal. Why not?
You've called currency manipulation the mother of all trade barriers. Right. Why is that such an important issue?
Well, because it's possible that we would have all these really strong provisions on labor rights, on environmental protections, of course of which I'm not convinced we have at all, quite the contrary.
No one knows if we have.
Right. But even if we did, even if we had a strong agreement across the board, but failed to deal with currency, we could see countries like Japan manipulate the yen against the dollar, and everything that we gain through all the other provisions of a trade agreement can be lost by the differential between currencies. And so if we were to open our markets, in fact, reduce tariffs, say, for instance, on U.S.-made trucks, which right now is one of the few areas where we have some protection against currency manipulation by the Japanese. We take down those tariffs, and then we don't have any protections on currency. They get back into currency manipulation, and what we'll do is open our markets and have no access to theirs, because no matter what we produce, if they're able to manipulate the value of their currency against ours, our products will not compete in their markets.
Because by manipulating the currency, their products come in at a cheaper price.
Exactly. So like right now, for example, U.S.-made products as opposed to Japanese products have about between a $1,500 up to about an $8,000 disadvantage because of currency. And of course, one of the things that we keep hearing is, well, the Japanese are not currently actively involved in currency manipulation. Okay. But that doesn't mean that they won't be at some point in time. I mean, I was in Japan. I met with Prime Minister Abe. It's very clear what their goal is by being involved in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Increase exports. And increase exports to the United States. Not once did we hear what we really need here in Japan is access to the great products that you're building in the United States. 6% of vehicles sold in Japan are produced outside of Japan.
Yeah.
6%. I mean, that's a closed market.
We have to get our products to your markets, is what they're saying, not the other way around. All right, 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-PRESS. Thank you, 7377.
All that.
You got it.
The Bill Press Show. Representative Dan Kildee will be back after this break. Stay with us.
This is the Bill Press Show.
What gets you into college? Good SAT scores? High GPA? Lots of extracurriculars?
Sure, but what you really need is money.
If you don't have the cash, you'll need a loan.
And we mean huge student loans, because the cost of college has risen 1,000% in the last 30 years.
This means big money for the banks that collect fees and interest.
Now, millions of young people are starting their adult lives with an average of $29,000 of loans on their backs.
Altogether, we're talking $1.2 trillion in student debt.
And more people are finding it impossible to pay them back. Welcome to the student debt crisis.
The increasing demand for higher education and cuts to state funding gave colleges a huge incentive to keep inflating prices.
I graduated about a year ago, currently in $35,000 of debt.
I am in debt about like $25,000.
I owe $23,000.
I owe over $50,000 in student loans.
38.8 million Americans owe money on a student loan.
and the biggest names in banking are making huge profits off the booming student loan industry. Sallie Mae, the largest provider of private student loans, made $949 million last year.
They only give you about 6 months to look for a job. You have to start paying back the loan. It's very pressuring, especially nowadays. It's very hard to find a job.
Over half of the students graduating in 2012 could not find a decent paying job.
They either had low-wage jobs or unpaid internships or were unemployed altogether.
So you can't make the payments. You start incurring late fees, which makes the loan even harder to pay off.
And it stays with you for years, even decades.
Right now, a third of the people who started repaying their loans are delinquent or in default.
That's 13.7 million people, more than the populations of Chicago, New York, and San Francisco combined.
Worse, it's not just the borrowers who are in trouble. Many loans require co-signers.
So if the student is unable to pay, that co-signer, a father, a mother, or a grandparent, is now on the hook.
Even a grandparent's Social Security benefits can be garnished to pay the loan.
We should have an answer to this. If you get really behind in your car payment or your credit cards, you can file for bankruptcy.
But Congress has made it nearly impossible to discharge student loans through bankruptcy.
Big institutions make big profits while students try to make ends meet under crushing debt.
Is this how we want our education system to work?
The whole point of going to college is to get the career you want, but lately that's been discouraged because no one can afford school. You get a job just to pay off your student loans.
We need higher education, not higher debt.
Sign up to end the student debt crisis at higherednotdebt.org.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
All right, 50 minutes after the hour, continuing with Congressman Dan Kildee of Michigan's 5th District, discussing, of course, the TPP, which has come to dominate Obama's second term and really characterize his relationship with Democrats on the Hill. It has soured relations, and of course I wonder what it's going to mean for other Obama priorities. We'll have to see. But the good congressman just came back from Japan, from Vietnam and Myanmar, and met with labor activists on the ground there to talk about their feelings about this deal and whether or not they think, as the president says, that it's the most progressive deal in history. Do they think it has enough labor protections, for instance, in Vietnam?
No. In fact, the individuals that I spoke with were really anxious about this because they do see, just to be clear, this as the potential opportunity for them to have their standards raised, but haven't seen anything about this agreement, and neither have I, that guarantees or even takes us in that direction.
No, what are they looking for? What do they want to see from this agreement?
The most important thing is to require Vietnam to allow for independent trade unions. Right now, there is one labor union in Vietnam, the VGCL, and it is essentially a wholly controlled entity of the Communist Party, which is really one in the same with their government. So when this so-called union is negotiating with state-owned, partially state-owned corporations, it's me negotiating with me over what I want.
Yeah.
And so unless they allow for independent trade unions, which starts with the right of association, which is not allowed in Vietnam. People are jailed for trying to create independent. I met with one trade unionist who had recently been released from prison for 4 years for simply trying to organize a union independent of the VGCL. And there are still others sitting in prison in Vietnam right now for doing the same thing. How we can imagine that they will suddenly overnight become this open society with open competition and free association, free speech, the right to organize, in order to enter this trade agreement is beyond me.
So when the president says this will allow union members in Vietnam or workers in Vietnam to organize, what is he referring to? What's the policy change that is in the agreement?
The agreement says that Vietnam will comply with so-called ILO standards, International Labor Organization standards. But my view on this is, show me. You know, but there's no indication that that is actually what's going to happen, number one. Second, there's no indication that Vietnam is being transparent at all in its dealings with us. They say they're going to do it. There's no timetable. Are they going to change their constitution, for example, which says that they have this one labor union, this one and only labor union? No provision, no assurance that that's going to happen. And here's the problem. You know, theoretically, I suppose it's possible that they would do this. It would mean changing the structure of their government and economy in order to do this. Why don't we say, okay, Vietnam, here's the deal. Do it. Then we'll start negotiating with you about being in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This thing's almost written, almost completely written, which is another question about why we're now granting authority to the executive branch to negotiate something that's already negotiated. But if we're going to do this, and it's going to be a so-called high standards agreement, let's do it right. There's no time clock ticking that says we have to have this done by September. If it's going to happen, do it right.
And let's make sure we have enforcement mechanisms to ensure that the concessions Vietnam makes, that it abides by those rules. I mean, we've seen in places like Colombia, Guatemala, they agree to the labor standards, and then you have labor activists killed, murdered, intimidated, and nothing really
I've
changes.
seen nothing that says Vietnam intends to fundamentally change this.
Congressman Dan Kildee from Michigan's 5th District. You can follow him on Twitter at Rep. Dan Kildee. An excellent Twitter follow.
That's right. It is.
Thank you so much, sir. The Bill Press Show will continue with more TPP with Congressman Sandy Levin. That's next here on The Bill Press Show.
This is The Bill Press Show.
You wouldn't let money just blow out of your house. So when your AC or heater is on, make sure the doors, windows, and fireplace flue are shut tight. If you're headed out, turn down the AC or lower the heat by 10 degrees. And always keep your water heater set at 120. A little bit of common sense goes a long way. Get more great tips at energysaver.gov.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. You know, but it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, you know, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
A few years ago, plastic bag waste in our city came to a tipping point. It was clear. We had a bag problem. My department was tasked to reduce plastic bag consumption. We needed to come up with ways to change human behavior. So we asked ourselves,
would you like a bag?
What do people really hate?
Yep.
Getting punched in the stomach. Preliminary studies showed that the consequences weren't severe enough to warrant behavioral change.
Actually, can I get that double bagged?
So we thought, what do people hate more than getting punched in the stomach? Kissing Helga.
Hey, big boy.
People didn't find her so offensive after all, so we had to get creative.
How many bags? Okay, now, pour this ice water down your pants.
We tried everything.
Eat this rat. Defuse this bomb.
Even fighting your clone. After blowing through millions of dollars of government funds on research, I came up with a brilliant idea.
Why don't we just charge 5 cents per bag?
That's a stupid idea.
Would you like a bag?
Yes.
5 cents a bag.
5 cents? 5 cents? Do I still have the option of getting punched?
Honestly, I don't know how everyone else missed it.
Why don't you just get a reusable bag?
Seen on Free Speech TV and online on TawkrTV. This is the Bill Press Show.
57 minutes after the hour, the Bill Press Show. I'm Igor Volsky of Think Progress. We're going to be joined in just a couple of minutes, the next hour, by Congressman Sandy Levin, the 9th District of Michigan, to continue our conversation about the TPP, the Trade-Pacific Partnership, the 12-country trade agreement that the president and progressive Democrats are in a really big fight over. And I think a lot of people feel, what's the big deal? This is just a trade agreement. This is, after all, an agreement that says that products can come into American markets without any additional tariffs, and America can send and export high-tech services, expertise to the countries of the Pacific. But it's much more than that, because it has provisions on intellectual property rights, on the pharmaceutical industry, on labor standards that many Democrats say are far too weak, and that's precisely the problem. We'll get into all of that with Congressman Sandy Levin in the next hour. Stay with us.
This is the Bill Press Show.
What they told us we were doing was going to rid the state of frivolous lawsuits. So we said, okay, let's vote for this.
Leading up to the 2003 effort in Texas, the insurance companies primarily, but also the medical industry, started this drumbeat. They were alleging that medical malpractice lawsuits were soaring and the cost of healthcare was going way up. They barraged the citizens of Texas with these frightening, scary messages that we were in some sort of crisis. But the reality was that simply wasn't true.
One of the things I think the public doesn't fully understand is that lawsuits are about a lot more than just seeking compensation for an individual plaintiff. By giving damages to the individual, the jury is sending a message about safety to the doctors, the nurses, the hospital. Please change your ways. Make healthcare safer to protect all of us.
Bill and Kelly Putnam experienced a nightmare scenario. They're in the nursing home with their father. The nurse administers medication improperly. As a result, he started to choke on the medication, and Kelly was forced to provide CPR on her father while staff at the nursing home did nothing.
I was probably 6 inches away from my dad's eyes. He's no longer thrashing, he's no longer moving.
And so they took him to the hospital, they worked on him, cause of death, aspiration. Texas Board of Nursing ruled that the nurse not only did what we said she did, but she also said that the facility had her destroy the medical records for that day and create a new version. I decided to give a lawyer friend a call. I went through probably 10, maybe more. All of them I got the same letter back, stating that because of tort reform, we cannot afford to litigate these types of cases.
What the 2003 restrictions did was make it economically unfeasible for most attorneys to take most medical malpractice cases. It's a cynical attempt to make it harder for people to go to court by making it harder for them to get representation.
I do remember when Patricia Whitman first contacted me, because as a cardiologist, I was pretty outraged when I looked at the medical records.
Patricia Whitman visited the emergency room complaining of chest pains. They look at her EKG. Doctor says, no, you've got indigestion, go home. The symptoms persist. Next day she goes in, sees a different physician. She's been having a heart attack.
Anyone looking at this EKG in a patient with chest pain has to consider that that patient is having an acute heart attack until proven otherwise. All of these abnormalities were essentially ignored, and a diagnosis of acid reflux was made in Patricia Whitman's case, and that was the wrong diagnosis.
The doctor came in and he said that I had substantial permanent heart damage and that I was, quote unquote, 100% disabled. Prior to the heart attack, I had a 3,500 square foot home that I took care of, and I was on my feet 8 hours a day going to cosmetology school. Then I would come home and cook for my kids and do whatever else needed to be done. I did it all. After the heart attack, I couldn't keep up with the house. I couldn't pay the mortgage. My life has changed a lot. I will never be able to do what I used to do. I have to depend on 5 heart medications that I have to take every day in order to survive. This is a letter from one attorney. It would be difficult to prove that the ER physician's conduct rose to the level of gross negligence. No attorney would take my case.
Tort reform involved a specific passage of language that said that a simple negligence standard no longer applied to emergency room care in Texas. The new standard was a gross negligence standard called willful and wanton negligence.
You have to prove in court that that doctor saw me walk through the door and said, that's my next victim. And of course that doesn't happen. And so people like Patricia Whitman, who find themselves in the emergency room and are misdiagnosed or harmed, face almost no ability for accountability. If you look back and you break down the arguments made by the insurance companies and medical industry about the cost, quality, access of healthcare in Texas, by every metric, we're worse off today than we were 10 years ago. It has made life better and easier for a small group of corporate interests at the expense of the rest of us.
These corporations, they have no fear because they know that they're not going to be held responsible. It shouldn't be about money. But unfortunately, that's the only language these people speak. That's why we're out protesting.
We will stand out on the street in front of the facility with signs that state what happened and make sure that they understand that we're not going to go away and that what they did was wrong.
We must restore meaningful accountability in this state so that another family does not go through the same nightmare that they've been through. If enough people in the public say enough is enough, then politicians have to think twice. We're never going to be able to compete with the special interests in terms of campaign contributions and money. Where we have to compete with them is in boots on the ground. The more people that rise up and say, we want our rights back, then they have to think about it. And once we've made them think about it, then half the battle is won.
Broadcasting around the nation, on your radio, on your TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
All right, 6 minutes after the hour, The Bill Press Show coming to you live here from our studios in Washington, D.C. for this Tuesday, May 19th, 2015. I'm Igor Volsky of Think Progress, and joining us now on the line is Congressman Sandy Levin of Michigan's 9th District. We've been discussing the Trans-Pacific Partnership and what it means for Americans, what it means for the people of Vietnam and the other countries with whom the president is urging Democrats in Congress to sign off on a huge trade deal that would cover about 40% of America's economy. Congressman, welcome to the program.
Glad to be with you.
Now, the president always talks about you're either with me on this trade deal or you're going to let China write the rules. But you introduced a piece of legislation called the Right Track for the Trans-Pacific Partnership Act, which kind of lays out a progressive alternative, a progressive vision for a trade deal. How did that measure differ from what we're seeing now in the TPP?
Well, in very important respects. The problem is, I want a TPP, but it has to be done right. It has to be truly a major step forward. It has to shape trade and not simply assume that it will all work out in the wash. And so when you look at various issues, for example, on medicines, the May 10th agreement, so-called, essentially was put together by a few of us House Democrats with support within the House Democratic Caucus. It addressed, for the first time effectively, issues relating to worker rights, the environment, and medicines, and essentially drew a balance so that there was protection of intellectual property rights, but the ability of citizens in other countries to access medicines they needed. And what this agreement does, from what we see, it really upsets that. And it leans very much towards the pharmaceutical companies and against the access to generics in many, many respects, some of them technical but very important. It's just one example. The same is true also in terms of worker rights. What's new to this negotiation is Vietnam, and also not new, old, but important is Mexico. Vietnam is the first communist country we've ever negotiated with. I warned them early on when I was at Singapore when the talks were launched. Vietnam is different. There is no independent labor movement. If you try to form a labor union independently of the main communist union, you get thrown in jail. When I was in Vietnam, I met a woman who had been in jail 4 years, 4 months because she tried to form an independent union, and 2 of her colleagues are still in jail. So that has to be changed, and at this point, it hasn't been. Mexico, as we know, they compete with us. We have an integrated automotive market to some extent. They're now shipping more cars from Mexico to the U.S., I think, than any other country exports to the U.S. Wages there remain very low, and they're 1/5 of what they are in the United States. So when people talk about a level playing field, we have to really get serious about that. And unfortunately, there is no indication. There is no indication that is to Mexico that they're going to be required to meet the standards that we put into the May 10th agreement, which is the basic ILO standards, the right to bargain, the right to form unions, and the right not to have the company essentially have a yellow dog contract with the union.
Now, the labor standards, the environmental standards that were part of the May 10th agreement, which Democrats formed in 2007 when President George W. Bush was negotiating a different trade agreement, all of those have to be enforced. And what we've seen in countries from Colombia to Guatemala is you could have those standards in place, but if there's no real robust process of enforceability, they go by the wayside. Is it possible to design a mechanism that even if you have those tough standards in place, that the countries that are signatories to those deals will actually abide by them? Or, in other words, have very strong incentives not to violate the letter of the law?
The answer is yes. Indeed, with Peru, which was the first one to incorporate May 10th, we had to do the negotiating because the Bush administration did not want to negotiate a trade agreement with worker rights and environment and medicines in it. So actually, Charlie Rango and I did the negotiating with the Peruvian government. We insisted that the laws be changed before we voted on it. So that's the best way to make sure that enforcement occurs. In the case of Mexico, we don't have any assurance as to what is being done and that the changes that are necessary to bring them up to ILO standards will be done before we vote. Much of this in this case, is being done secretly.
Does it bother you, Congressman, that the president is treating critics of this deal, Democratic critics like yourself, as kind of like bothersome bugs that he's trying to kind of swat away, and claiming that you just don't understand the deal and you just don't get what he's trying to do?
Well, when he talks about anti-globalization, I mean, we have put together trade agreements. When he talks about we're dedicated to the status quo, we're the ones who really helped to shape the May 10th agreement. And we've been actively in trying to get other trade agreements correct. So I think that kind of attack is so wrong. It just isn't correct. It misrepresents what we're all about. Not opposed to free trade, but opposed to free trade if the assumption is that more trade is better and you don't have to really shape it and it will work out in the wash. That's a notion that goes back to the 19th century. And Ricardo said essentially comparative advantage will work, so you don't have to worry. You put two economies together and it will work out for the best. But that doesn't occur when one of the economies has much lower wages, where they don't let their workers organize, where they have state-owned enterprises, so immense subsidies, where they rig their currency. I mean, that isn't anything close to a level playing field. And what happens if you buy that notion is you allow two economies to compete when one of them is essentially rigging the rules. And some people say they don't care. Adam Smith said it would work out that way. But there weren't state-owned enterprises. There weren't these vast differences in wages. There wasn't pollution used as an economic tool, et cetera, et cetera. So we need a new notion as to how international economics works. It has to have standards built into it. And unfortunately, the Obama administration labels those worried about it very incorrectly. Their approach is not a progressive approach in many respects.
Congressman Sandy Levin joining us from Michigan's 9th District. Congressman, does it bother you that Hillary Clinton, who had supported the TPP while at the State Department, that she doesn't have a position on this issue, an issue that's animating the political debate, animating the rift within her own party? I mean, has she reached out to you? You've been leading on this issue. Has she asked you for counsel as she kind of, I guess, forms a position on the TPP?
You know, she laid out some basic principles that I think were solid principles, and materials have been sent to them, and they're in the process of deciding how they'll proceed. One of the really sad aspects of this is that the Obama administration went ahead and really did not address these key issues effectively, if at all, or until very late. That's true of Vietnam and labor. We warned them, you have to tackle it. It's not easy, but do it. We said when you said that TPP was going to cure NAFTA, that was only going to be true if you got addressed issues in Mexico. You know, Mexico, so many of the employees are working under these contracts where they have no say. And the labor board in Mexico essentially rubber stamps this system that really violates the basic premises of the May 10th agreement and the ILO standards. So getting back to your question, I think that Hillary Clinton is concerned about these issues. She's expressed those concerns. And as this debate now unfolds, she'll have to make a decision as to her judgment about this.
Would you be able to support a Democratic nominee who doesn't come out against the TPP as it currently stands, or at least doesn't support the labor or environmental standards that you've been calling for?
I think the main thing is to have this discussion and really, really push down on what this agreement is all about. And I think it would be helpful, the more Hillary Clinton participates, the better, because there is a basic issue here. And the basic issue goes beyond a lot of the rhetoric. The basic issue is this. For decades, we've been trying to push this notion that more trade is not automatically better. We favor expanded trade. We've helped to shape trade agreements. But you have to shape their content to spread their benefits. You know, when we started on worker rights and the environment, the Republicans and others, some of the traditionalists, called them social issues, when the problem was they were very economic issues that countries, including our own, did not want to face up to them. So this is really a basic issue as to how international economics should work, and I'm hopeful that this debate will bring everybody into it, including Hillary Clinton.
Do you feel like ultimately this will shake out in your favor? In other words, with the progressive populism we've seen in Democratic politics, people like Elizabeth Warren and yourself kind of leading the way on these issues, do you think you could turn the page here and really encourage or force the president to renegotiate parts of the TPP, which is already almost done, to incorporate some of your concerns?
I hope so. I'm opposed to this TPA. I'm opposed to giving up our leverage to get it right. I want a TPP that I could vote for and that would have broad Democratic support, as we've been able to get for some previous trade agreements like Peru when it was done correctly. So I'm hopeful that can happen. The only way we're going to do that, unfortunately, we're in this position of having to defeat this TPA. But I think that would be a prelude to forcing these issues on the table, worker rights, the ISDS that we haven't even discussed. There is a real issue with private investors being able to use arbitration panels. We need to also discuss the medicines issue much more clearly. And there are these other issues that simply need to be addressed, because trade hasn't been the only cause of middle-class stagnation, but it's been one of them. We lost several million jobs because Japan and then China rigged their currency.
But, Congressman, given the level of the rhetoric you've seen from the president, when you bring these concerns up with him, with members of his staff, who I'm sure are reaching out to you, are they accommodating? Do you feel like they're hearing your concerns, that they're maybe taking down notes and seriously considering changing portions of this? Are they open to change?
I think the only way they'll be open to change is this challenge to TPA. You know, there are negotiating objectives in the Hatch-Wyden bill. They're meaningless. I mean, they are a wish list. There's no enforceability. The one that judge whether or not these very loose, vague objectives have been met are the people who are doing the negotiating. So, no, I haven't given up hope that we can keep our leverage and force an agreement that can have a broad support within the Democratic Party. Maybe not the majority. That's always been difficult. But we've always been able to obtain when an agreement that had a broad base, if it was worthy of passage.
All right, Congressman Sandy Levin of Michigan's 9th District, thank you so much for joining us, and keep up the good fight.
Well, and you keep it up. I think the more we discuss this, the better, and we're just emphatic about broadening the debate here, bringing everybody into it.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bill Press Show continues right after this. Stay with us.
This is the Bill Press Show.
They called her Little Sanju. She was born in a village at the foot of the Himalayas, the smallest of 7 brothers and sisters.
My family was very poor. To get by, we raised cows and we made small things for tourists out of bamboo. But we were always hungry, and no matter how hard he tried, my father was always in debt. When I was 11, my father told me I had to go to work making carpets. I had to leave with a man who took me to the carpet factory. The broker who took me away got paid, but they never paid my father anything. I made knots from 4 in the morning until 8 at night. There was never a day off. I was always hungry. I cut my fingers while weaving and had to weave with cut fingers. My hands began to look like my grandmother's. I cried every night. I thought the rest of my life would be only this.
It takes 1 million knots to make one 8x10 rug. In the 1990s, 1 million children were enslaved making carpets in South Asia. Then a hero entered the picture. It was you. If you knew how these carpets were made, you would no longer think they were so beautiful. And if you could choose a better rug, your buying power could end child slavery in the rug industry. From that simple idea, Goodweave was born. Here's how it works. To earn the Goodweave label, companies agreed not to employ children. Goodweave makes sure by conducting surprise inspections. When children are found, Goodweave helps them.
2 years ago, a Goodweave inspector named Grona found me in the factory. When I saw him, I was scared, but Grona put his arm around me and told me it would be okay. Grona took me to Hamrogar, a home for rescued carpet kids run by Goodweave. I'm the first person in my family to ever go to school.
Today, thousands of children like Sanju have been educated and rescued by Goodweave. And because you chose the Goodweave label, 3/4 of those million children weaving carpets are now free. And Sanju, with Goodweave's support, she's able to attend her village school and live at home where she belongs. Now that's a beautiful rug that tells a beautiful story. Stand with Sanju. Insist on the Goodweave label.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds. At highway speeds, that's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop the texts, stop the wrecks.
Seen on Free Speech TV and online on TawkrTV. This is the Bill Press Show.
All right, 26 minutes after the hour, the Bill Press Show for this Tuesday, May 19th, 2015. I'm Igor Volsky of Think Progress. Peter, file this under, whoa, hypocrisy.
I will file it under that.
Representative Scott Desjarlais. He's a Republican from Tennessee.
Okay.
And like all Republicans, he, of course, voted for the 20-week abortion ban that they considered last week.
Okay.
Not really newsy, kind of expected.
Yeah, right.
Well, turns out this good congressman forced his wife, his ex-wife, to consider having an abortion.
Oh, dear.
And also heavily pressured one of his many mistresses to also abort the child they had together. Transcripts from his divorce, in fact, reveal that he was willing to travel out of state to ensure that his mistress secures the abortion that he was demanding.
Yikes.
Yes.
That's terrible.
It is terrible, but it's not surprising because we've seen many pro-life advocates change their tune as soon as the question of abortion becomes personal, because it's easy to discuss abortion in the abstract when it's somebody else, when it's affecting another person. But when it comes to you and when it's personal, that decision changes very, very quickly because of where you are in your life, because of your maybe economic situation, because of certain relationships you have. You make a choice that is very different than the one you think you would make if you were ever in that situation. And if you look at opinion polls, when people are asked, should abortion be legal, it's really divided evenly. Half the country thinks it should, half the country thinks it shouldn't. But when the question becomes far more personal,
yeah, exactly.
What would you do?
Exactly.
Those numbers really change.
Yeah, I think a lot of politicians would be well served to think of some of their legislation in those terms. What if it was me? Or what if it was someone close to me? Yeah.
All right, quick break. We'll be back here on the Bill Press Show.
This is the Bill Press Show.
So this is my computer.
This is your computer. Let's go on the internet.
Let's go. Click it.
Yes.
Okay.
I cursor in between the R and the E. When I say dot, I want you to just push the period.
She's gonna love me all over again.
That's it. Jamaica, here you come.
Here we go.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. And I did it by myself. Feel smarter.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. You know, but it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, you know, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
All right. I know this isn't any fun to talk about, but we should. Okay. So who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice.
And I'll try to get the generator going without any gas.
Oh, let's not forget the cell phones, which probably won't work.
Right.
And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
Well, I think we couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
Hey, thanks for stopping by. You know, I followed your character since the first episode. I'm a big fan. Big fan.
Thank you.
And listen, your storyline, it makes for incredible TV drama. Thing is, your drug use is very adult content. Too adult for the kids. So I'm gonna have to block you.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Well, have a good one.
You're a nice lady.
Connect with The Bill Press Show on Twitter. Follow us at BP Show and tweet using the hashtag WatchingBP. This is The Bill Press Show.
33 minutes after the hour, The Bill Press Show for this Tuesday, May 19th, 2015. Well, we couldn't have a Bill Press Show if we didn't talk about the 2016 election.
That's right.
If we didn't discuss all the 35 Republicans who are running for office for the presidency. And joining us now to do that is Emma Roller, staff correspondent for the National Journal. Emma, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, before we get to the candidates, I want to talk about the raid against the top ISIS leader that the administration was just so eager to tell everybody about this weekend. Maybe to blunt the news that ISIS advanced and captured the capital of Anbar province, one of the largest regions in Iraq, which of course brings us to the question of ISIS and America's policy towards ISIS and how that's playing in the 2016 election. And as far as I can tell, everyone thinks that it's kind of a big threat, that instability in the region is creating havoc for American interests, creating in the region, but also creating somewhat of a threat here at home. Mm-hmm. Yet, if you listen to the Republican candidates, they don't really have a policy outside of, I'm going to kill them. I'm going to get them. They'll be dead. I will spare no expense to kill them.
That's a good Lindsey Graham impression.
Well, thank you. He's jumping in soon, so I thought I'd practice. Why not? Why in this post-Iraq Bush era, and during a time where they know they're going to run against the Democratic candidate who has a lot of foreign policy experience and will probably have some kind of detailed plan to deal with this threat down the road when she's taking questions about it? Why don't Republicans have a more thoughtful approach than, I'm going to kill them?
Well, I think
we're going to get these fellas in ISIS.
I think that this might be a sort of simplistic hot take for you, Igor, but
I'm ready.
Yeah, but I think that the specter of the Iraq War still looms large, including in how we talk about ISIS today. And you've just seen in the past week when Jeb Bush was asked about how he would deal with the Iraq War, knowing what we do now today, which is sort of a cop-out because not much of the intelligence has changed all that much. But this is all to say Marco Rubio also sort of, waffled on that question. Iraq and how voters feel about how the Iraq War played out, which is to say not well, is probably what I think is influencing Republicans and Democrats to be sort of wary about weighing in and saying, yes, we need to triple the ground troops, which is what Lindsey Graham is saying.
Well, to me, look, ISIS is a real threat now. I mean, they control large parts of Iraq, large parts of Syria. The Iraqi troops that I guess we're training or are about to train or are preparing to train or are trying to figure out which are the good ones that we can train are not really going to do it because they haven't been able to stop an ISIS advance when there's one directly coming at them. If they're like in a place where there's like 5 ISIS members, they got it. Mm-hmm. But if it's any more than that, if it's a real campaign, they really can't sustain that. And the political situation in Iraq also a little tenuous and unclear if the government there can mobilize not only the army but also larger parts of the political coalition to really fight against ISIS. And so really it's going to be up to, as far as I can tell, the United States and maybe some kind of global coalition to really put enough force into this to squash these guys. And the fact that, look, we can all have our talking points of no troops on the ground and we'll just bomb them, but that hasn't worked. And without any kind of honest conversation of what it's going to take to fix this huge disturbance in the region that was created by the Iraq War and other factors, like how can we have an honest conversation? Which is why I say you need to really come to terms with what we did in Iraq, and only then can you lay out a policy that will actually deal with the threat.
Right, and I think what we're seeing now is a lot of 2016 candidates, Jeb Bush and even Hillary Clinton, do not really want to touch that subject at all, even though, Republican strategists were really frustrated with Jeb's response on that and said, as a political strategist, that is the first question you sort out your answer to, because your brother was the president who invaded Iraq.
Yeah, how do you not have an airtight stock answer to that?
Right.
Knowing
and then
that you're
3
going
more
to get
answers.
It. Yeah, right.
My favorite explanation in the Washington Post this past Sunday was, well, he was really tired. He was coming home from a trip, and he had this Fox News interview, and he just thought Megyn Kelly would be easy, and so he just wasn't really prepared to answer that. He wasn't ready. He didn't have his A game on, and that's all that happened.
To park on the Jeb Bush thing specifically for a moment, he really clearly seems to not be ready for this.
He's not ready to really put up a fight, I think, and to be on his A game for the nomination.
The A game thing, because this is not his first mistake. I've talked about this before. It's not in the past 2 months, he's made some pretty big screw ups and had to walk them back.
What else did he do?
There was the Indiana religious freedom law that he came out and yes, of course we love this site. This is great. And then even the governor was kind of like, we messed that up, and so he had to walk that back. His advisor, what's his name? James Baker, when he spoke to J Street, right? He was all for that, which is this progressive group, and then he had to walk that back and say, oh, yeah, that wasn't the greatest idea. And then his Iraq climb the mountain of conflict moment that he had to immediately walk back and still hasn't given a great answer to. That's in, I think, probably 7 or 8 weeks that those 3 things have happened. Those are big screw-ups. And then all of them, his excuse was kind of like, I kind of need to refine my answer a little bit, which you don't really get the opportunity to do.
Or, that's a hypothetical, which in presidential politics, we're all dealing in hypotheticals.
Yeah, that's all running for president is. Right. It's all about hypotheticals because you're not actually the president. So the fact that you are running means you're going to have to answer what you would do if you were president in any given situation. It's called a campaign.
So if I could play devil's avocado for a moment.
Delicious, yeah. How ripe is this going to be?
Let's just say that Jeb Bush hasn't announced that he's running for president yet because maybe he won't, because he's realized now that he's terrible at this. Is that even a remote possibility, or are those just pipe?
Oh, that is hard. What do you tell those donors? JK, haha.
Yeah, sorry.
I mean, to interrupt a donor handing over, a $1 million check to say, oh, no.
Yeah, right.
I just don't see that happening.
And, all the buzz on Jeb Bush is that he really feels entitled to be president. I mean, this is someone who thought he would be in the White House far sooner than his brother, George W., and who feels like he's carrying the family legacy and feels like he's correcting a wrong when his father lost his re-election campaign to Bill Clinton, and that he really believes that he's going to be a great president. And so I think for him personally to say, I couldn't answer one question and I had a bad week of press, and because of that, I'm giving up my big chance, I think that's hard to swallow.
And the flip side of that is that Jeb then I believe when he was in Nevada, turned around and said, Hillary Clinton cannot continue dodging press questions. And it's hard to not interpret that as, sort of sour grapes, like, oh, Megyn Kelly is really riding me on Iraq. And meanwhile, Hillary Clinton is not even talking to any local Iowa reporters even. Correct the Record, which is a sort of press shop,
super PAC,
nebulous organization working to, correct supposedly false narratives about Hillary Clinton's campaign. They came out with a press release yesterday saying Hillary Clinton has answered questions from real Americans, just not reporters.
And the fact that she feels like she doesn't have to, and she doesn't at this point of the game, but the fact that she doesn't want to me, really speaks to this question, and this has been the Republican narrative, but speaks to this question of transparency and this notion that plagued her first campaign for the White House of being above it all and not really having to engage on really these key issues. I mean, we talked about the TPP last hour. I mean, that's a major question animating Democratic politics that she hasn't even really, given any kind of indication of whether her position has changed from when she was part of this administration.
Right. And it seems like she's not really following through on what she said at the very start of the campaign, which is she said something like, oh, a new grandbaby, a new presidential campaign. Why not a new relationship with the press?
Yeah.
And, that reset button might be jammed or something. I don't know.
I mean, they definitely, I think, feel like, look, Bernie Sanders, Martin O'Malley, whoever you throw at us will...
Can we please not forget Jim Webb?
Jim Webb, of course.
Come on.
Will appropriate some of their rhetoric, right? So from Bernie when it comes to the economy, I don't know what they're taking from O'Malley, they'll find something, to kind of neutralize their impact. So Bernie, for instance, on the economy, if Hillary Clinton sounds like a populist, which she kind of does, there's really no room for him to, no, she's not going to be for Medicare for all, but, she'll be for some kind of expansion somewhere maybe of Medicare that she can support. So that's kind of the strategy. And I think internally it makes a lot of sense, but it reads, I think, very poorly. But at the same time, us reporters, when we write stories about, why isn't she taking our questions? Yes. We just look like kind of these whiny
It looks a little butthurt.
Yeah, who are just really upset that Hillary won't talk to us. So I think as long as this narrative doesn't pick up steam and doesn't begin to define her, I think they're okay kind of politically, but they really got to be careful.
Yeah, it is still very early, which is what, the addendum that reporters have to say all the time. And it's easy for us to overreact and say, oh my God, why isn't she, answering any of these questions? And obviously that's great fodder for all the Republicans who are running either in name only or formally. But further down the line, she certainly cannot continue to. That's not a tenable strategy.
Well, I can't wait for those days. Emma Roller, staff correspondent for National Journal. As we continue analyzing the 2016 election, stay with us back on the other side of the break here on The Bill Press Show.
This is The Bill Press Show.
Tune into Free Speech TV for Democracy Now!, a national, independent, award-winning news program bringing you people and perspectives rarely seen on corporate media.
I'm the retired bishop with the Episcopal Church as the bishop for all chaplains in federal service. I read that there was a group of people that represented a sense of injustice that I had. We'd lost Zuccotti. I mean, there was a kind of a hope that maybe Trinity Church would be gracious and give refuge. We picked this day where we would gather and demonstrate that Trinity was closing its ears to what was happening. We marched around the block, and I realized that, my goodness, they're carrying a ladder. And I thought, well, this is the moment. You could feel a spiritual presence. You could feel a certain something. And then the cops came in. It got brutal.
I'm with you right here. Robin, I'm here.
The church needed, in this moment in history, to stand alongside of these protesters. The truth of Christ is found in the pews, is found in the institutional church, but it is also found in the streets. It's found in the honesty and the integrity, the insistence of people that you find in Occupy Wall Street.
Tune in to Gay USA with hosts Ann Northrup and Andy Hum for in-depth coverage of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender news. Watch Gay USA every week, only on Free Speech TV.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds. At highway speeds, that's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop the texts, stop the wrecks.
Service and the Ad Council.
The most valuable morning radio show, according to The Nation magazine. This is The Bill Press Show.
49 minutes after the hour, during the break, we were guessing how old I am. And
I was going to say like 26.
Just so everyone knows, Peter thought I looked a lot
How old do
younger.
you think I am?
25?
Just turned 26.
Oh, just turned 26.
I was pretty close.
Huh. It's okay. Peter's still the oldest guy in the room. That's all. That's all that matters. That's the takeaway.
I will
there.
always, well, not always.
All right, Emma Roller, staff correspondent for the National Journal. Follow her on Twitter at Emma Roller. Emma, as we continue discussing Hillary's run, there's a story in the New York Times about Clinton advisor and long-term aide Cindy Blumenthal.
You got it.
I got it there. And his role in shaping Hillary's policy while at the State Department. It turns out he wrote a series of memos advising Hillary on Libya and other issues, while at the same time being associated with businesses that had a financial stake in the outcome of that conflict. What are the details there, and is this a potential problem for the candidate?
Right. So this news about Sidney Blumenthal's relationship with the Clintons and his role as this sort of nebulous advisor figure for Hillary Clinton during her time as Secretary of State seems to be breathing some new life into the Benghazi investigation.
Of course.
So Congressman Trey Gowdy, who is leading the Benghazi committee, wants to subpoena Sidney Blumenthal and for a transcribed interview to talk about his role advising Clinton in that.
Because nobody knows if there's anything there, but the idea is, did he have conflicts of interest that he did not disclose?
Right.
And why was he writing these memos if he wasn't part of the State Department staff? He was barred from getting a job at the State Department by the Obama administration.
Right.
Yet he still was advising the secretary, and she was forwarding his memos onto high-level officials in the department to presumably act on.
And in a way, he's sort of the perfect poster child for Republicans' arguments or case against Hillary Clinton and Benghazi. You've got the email thing. He was emailing her on her private State Department account about Libya. Like you said, the Obama administration did not want him to be working in the State Department, and yet he was still continuing in this advisory role. And just the fact that he's been this sort of unknown figure for a while shows that, it just plays into the Republican narrative about Hillary Clinton and her lack of transparency.
Where there's smoke, there's fire, man. There's a lot of smoke around Hillary Clinton and her emails. And I think that these should all be taken very seriously.
And, of course, the problem is when you're not an actual government employee, that means you don't have to follow a lot of the disclosure rules that you would if you were actually employed by the government. So nobody really knows if there is a nexus that could be problematic. And, look, the Benghazi Committee, I think, is going to need to find something new in their investigation after the numerous others that kind of didn't see that Hillary could have prevented the tragedy or was anyway directly linked to the events there. So certainly they're releasing the report when, like around the election, November or something?
I think it's January 2016 when the whole trove of emails is going to be coming out, or that's what they're hoping, the State Department.
State Department emails.
Right. But in terms of Libya emails, those could be coming out within the next week or so.
So, like, in many ways, this, if there's something there, this could be a time bomb that will go off, just as the campaign is getting started. And so I wonder, if I'm the Hillary campaign, do I try to get ahead of this? Who knows? I guess we'll find out.
Definitely timing is a big factor, and that's why Trey Gowdy has been trying to, in this sort of tete-a-tete with Clinton's team, he wanted to do a transcribed interview with her, which would be, behind closed doors, which would mean that Republicans could sort of strategically leak out information.
All right. Emma Roller, staff correspondent for National Journal, will be following what happens with that, and I'm sure it won't disappoint. Emma Roller of the National Journal, staff correspondent. Follow her on Twitter at Emma Roller. We'll be back on the Bill Press Show. I'm Igor Volsky, sitting in for Bill Press.
This is the Bill Press Show.
It is possible to read the history of this country as one long struggle to extend the liberties established in our Constitution to everyone in America. In other words, who, according to our laws and culture, gets to be considered a person? The law creates legal personhood, and movements create law and change culture. So, how have the courts passed laws to shape our culture? That history goes way back before Citizens United. 1819, Dartmouth College versus Woodward, Supreme Court case, turned a corporate charter from a government-granted charter to a contract. This ruling gave corporations standing within the Constitution. 1886, Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad. Though the court did not rule on corporate personhood, the decision was subsequently cited as a precedent to hold that a private corporation is entitled to the same 14th Amendment rights of due process and equal protection as human beings. This makes it impossible for us to make laws that treat local businesses any differently than giant multinational corporations, even if their business practices are deemed to be harmful to workers, the environment and communities, or if they have a history of violating the law. Hale versus Henkel, 1906. The court granted corporations the Fourth Amendment search and seizure protection. Dodge versus Ford Motor Company, 1919. The Michigan Supreme Court says the business corporation is organized and carried on primarily for the profit of the stockholders. Stockholder primacy is established. The purpose of the corporation, according to the court, is no longer to serve the public good, as it had been. It is now to maximize profit for shareholders above all else. Pennsylvania Coal Company versus Mahon, 1922. Corporations get the Fifth Amendment takings clause, meaning if you pass a regulation that impacts a corporation's ability to make a profit, that is deemed a taking, and they can sue for the right to future profits lost. This creates a chilling effect, and local and state governments become much more hesitant to pass laws in the public interest for fear that corporations can claim loss of potential profits that cities and states will be on the hook to pay. Buckley versus Vallejo, 1976. The Supreme Court rules that spending money to influence elections is protected under the First Amendment, in effect saying that money is speech. Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, 2010.
Today, the Supreme Court of Chief Justice John Roberts declared that because of the alchemy of its 19th century predecessors in deciding that corporations had all the rights of people, any restrictions on how these corporate beings spend their money on political advertising are unconstitutional.
The court's ruling threatens to undermine the integrity of elected institutions across the nation. It's a rejection of the common sense of the American people.
Seen on Free Speech TV and online on TawkrTV. This is the Bill Press Show.
All right, 57 minutes after the hour, closing out the Bill Press Show for this Tuesday, May 19th, 2015. And Peter, I am glad that...
What a show.
What a show.
What a show.
What a show. That we really got into some of the details of why liberals and progressives are so infuriated with the TPP, and why this debate, why this argument they've had with Obama is so annoying, because both sides can really only talk about generalities. This thing is in public. And so you have on both sides this kind of apocalyptic tone of the left saying, yeah, we'll get rid of all the jobs, and Obama saying, but then China will rule the world. And the fact that we got into the real meat of the problems, the labor provisions not being enforced, the environmental provisions not being strong enough, I think that was a real service.
Yeah, I think so.
Public service here on the Bill Press Show. I'm Igor Volsky of Think Progress. On Wednesday, I don't know who's hosting. Hopefully someone better than me.
Oh, stop it.
The Bill Press Show.
Nice job today.
Thank you for joining us.
This is the Bill Press Show.